All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I'd now like to call the City Council regular session meeting to order. So we're going to go ahead and start with a roll call.
Mayor Bagley.
Here.
Council members Christensen. Finley. Martin. Peck. Rodriguez. Waters. Mayor, you have a quorum.
All right, let's say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, just a quick reminder that this meeting can be viewed on the live stream at www.longmontcolorado.gov. Also, it is a reminder that the June 4th meeting is the second open forum this year. So it's a rare opportunity to show up and yell at council and let us yell back, I guess. It's more of a free interchange. I'm kidding. We don't yell back. All right. Also, quick reminder to the public, tonight, since it's a regular session meeting, we're going to have first call public invited to be heard. If your name is not on this list, go get your name on the list, because if it doesn't get on the list, you're not going to be asked you're not going to be permitted to speak at the first call public invited to be heard. You'll still be able to speak, but you're going to have to wait till the end of the meeting, and by then nobody's here and it's not as fun. So go out, get your name on the list. The what? And it's usually midnight, 1 o'clock. So if you go out and put your name on, that's great. If not, let's get that in here so we can close that out. All right. There's no approval of minutes, agenda revisions, and submission of documents. Councilmember Finley? Yes. Okay. I don't know what you're going to do, but go give it a shot.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. In front of you is a page called 529 Jump. As part of our vision for the future, we want to see all kids succeed. And this 529 Jump group, before I had asked you to convene a task force, we have met. We feel like this is a great way to help every kindergartner in Longmont by helping them open up a college invest account and matching the first $50 that their parents put into it. It's similar to what the state's done with the $100 recently, but that doesn't start until kids that are born in January 1st, 2020, I believe. So we would start with the kindergartners in August in St. Vrain Valley Schools in Longmont. We feel our first year's budget will be $50,000, and we would like City Council to provide us with some seed money to get that going of $25,000. I would like to see that come out of our council contingency fund this year, and then ask the community to match that, and of course continue to fund it for at least the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, Doc. It was moved by Councilmember Finley, yes. And I heard it was seconded twice. So by Councilmember Waters and Councilmember Martin. So I guess question number one, nobody's in the queue. Question number one, how much is in the council contingency fund at the moment?
It looks like $35,000, but what I'm not sure about is the carryover from
there's
next year's budget.
I guess I'd want to know, because I've got some ideas that I know that I've already asked council to set aside contingency funds for. So if we use $25,000 for this, my only concern is that that's it. Bye-bye. No more. And so I'm curious as to what the carryover is.
Give me a...
Okay.
Can we find out how much we have?
We're playing small business owner at the end of the month. How much money we got?
$72,000.
Carryover?
Yes, is what. 37 is carryover.
Oh, okay.
35,
right,
so you have 72,000.
Let's go ahead and vote then. We got money, people. Let's spend it. Quote that in the Times call.
Well, this is a good thing to spend it on. Future of our citizens.
Yeah, 25,000. All right. They're not working, I don't think. Councilmember Peck? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Councilmember Peck. Oh, the kids, thank you. The children. All right. Let's go ahead. Can we clear the vote, please? If we could. All right. City manager's report. Anything? All right.
No,
I'm
no.
sorry. Before we move on, Dr. Waters?
Yeah, I was going to throw something at you. I said, wait a minute.
Great.
Take a look at that cue. So thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have like 3 things. Can I take them all at one time or one at a time?
Let's see how you do with the first one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
At our last meeting, I appreciate we had an item on the agenda that asked the question about council priorities to be reflected in the 2020 budget. It was an interesting conversation the way it unfolded, but it did leave me with a couple questions. And there's a nexus between item 1 and the second item I'm gonna bring up here. But the first question is, what's the intent? Since we voted on 1 or 2 ideas, there wasn't real council direction. What is the intent in terms of how the staff would deal with that conversation and whatever other input you've received? And kind of related to that is, how would any of us know what the rest of the council members offered as budget, what their priorities would be?
So I think what the mayor talked about is items coming into him and or me, and I think we would then discuss how we bring those items back to council so everyone is aware of what really is coming through, and we may need to bring that back for some direction based on those questions that come to us. So one, it'll be we're bringing it back to you. What was your other question? Sorry.
Well, how any of us, first of all, what are you going to do with it, and then how would
Right.
any of us get to see what other council members
Correct.
walked in with or had offered?
And then,
as
and
priorities?
so what we do with it, and so there's some other components of this that what I did see was similarities in some of the issues that I'm seeing that we need to deal with. Specifically, I think, there was one item that you mentioned with train horn noise, which is something that council has directed us in previous sessions to look at, and so that's part of the budget as we're preparing now. There was some overlap in terms of things that I was seeing in development services that you all were mentioning that we know if we move forward, we're going to need some staffing because we're finding a lot of these programs are actually, frankly, as we're aiming for the June 1st implementation of Prairie Dogs, we're realizing that there's an additional staffing requirement on some of these. So those are things that are embedded in our request coming forward, where it's actually something that I think we're all keen in on for various reasons and what we're seeing. And then where there's not that alignment, those may be items that we need to bring back to council at future dates. What I may want to do, and we've talked about this as a little bit, is as we're moving through this, instead of just dropping the budget, maybe touching base with council if we have some questions that we need to come forward in order to streamline the process.
I just don't want that conversation or this process to kind of slip away. And the reason I chuckled when you said Prairie Dogs, council members don't, that I've been invited to look at some Prairie Dog issues on Thursday of this week, and we may get a chance to visit with what we did with that ordinance before we get too far into the future. There's a relationship between this question and my second concern. We are weeks away from an anticipated due date or delivery date in response to direction we gave months ago to create, and for the shorthand, I'll just use an evaluation system, right? We've referred to an adaptation of the SES or a protocol or criteria. I've labeled this or characterized this a number of different ways. But for now, just an evaluation tool or system.
Correct.
Of private sector development proposals to evaluate them based on their contribution to a triple bottom line, right?
Right.
Benefits to our residents, impact on the environment, and then profits for a
Right.
developer. The date, when we talked about this in January, the date that we were anticipating was the 4th of June. Now, we're not there yet, but
Correct.
we're close, and the 4th of June is an open forum.
Correct.
I had forgotten about that until a few minutes ago.
Yep.
So now I have a concern that we've got a number of things moving forward together. One is that work. Second is the wildlife management plan. Third is the roll-up of both the evaluation system and the wildlife management plan and the riparian, the wetlands and watershed updates into a land code, right? So the sequencing of that is pretty important, right? That one folds in or reflects the other. In the meantime, as this has been unfolding, we continue to have proposals that are submitted and requests for permits to the planning department. And I'm concerned that whether or not, number one, are we on schedule to get the first piece of work done, and that's the evaluation system? And if we are, how does that get reflected in the wildlife management plan, if at all, and then ultimately in the land code? And is that on schedule? Because all that's supposed to be wrapped up by August 1st, as I recall.
Yeah, so we had all of that sort of wrapping up in the August timeframe. Some of these questions were coming at me this week. What I can tell you is we're still on time for a June, bringing that first run with council on that conversation on the model. June actually turned out to be an interesting month because of the open forum and then the Colorado Municipal League. And so it'll either, the 25th is what we scheduled based on what we were seeing. So that's there on that time frame. And then we will then move through those remaining processes. In terms of the other questions, I didn't ask that question of Joni, but those are conversations that we actually have some meetings scheduled to go over those timelines.
So the nexus between this and my first question is, to the degree that there are budget implications for what the deliverable is, right? The new evaluation system. It's going to be important. Again, I'll restate what I said last week, that
Right.
shows up in the budget. Here's a concern. now.
Can I answer that
Yeah,
question?
you can.
Those are actually, I've been made aware, I haven't seen the budget submittals, but Joni has indicated that she's
Great.
actually put those in her budget request.
Outstanding. I knew she'd be on top of it. Here's the bottom line concern. We continue to have development proposals submitted to planning. And now we're not going to have an evaluation system to even look at until June 25th, it sounds like, which puts us into July.
Right.
So I'm going to move that we delay the review of any new private sector proposal developments. Ones that are in the queue, I'm not talking about touching those other than to keep them moving forward. And anything new, we would delay review until after we've had a chance to approve whatever we label the new evaluation system.
Councilmember Peck?
Well, if it's June 25th, until we have a chance to approve a new private sector development proposal evaluation system. Well, the land code, at the end of the day, the land code's due, as I call it, July 24th in the materials that we saw back in January. My concern, I'm not, the nexus for me isn't with the land code, it's with the evaluation system. If we have that in place, I'm comfortable that we are reviewing new development proposals based on an evaluation system or protocol that is focused on a triple bottom line, which we've been talking about for a year. So that's my motion.
Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I would like to add an amendment to that, Councilman Waters. Our land code amendments are due to be here and okayed, codified by August 1st. That doesn't mean that they're going to be codified by August 1st. It means they're going to be brought back to us, and if there's anything added to it, it continues on, and we're going to be into 2 years as far as this goes. So I would like to amend your motion to include that we halt all new development along with your evaluation tool until we get those land development code amendments done. Because we are leaving the commissioners kind of in the planning commissioners in kind of a limbo until we get those amendments done. We don't have any rules and regulations on our codes unless we get those amendments done and anything for them to follow. So I would like staff to put all of their efforts in getting that done as soon as possible and brought back to us. So if you'll accept that, I would like to add that amendment to the.
So the date goes from what to what? Yeah, you're not, yeah, just go ahead
Well, I
and hit the
didn't
mic.
know who had the mic. It is contingent upon approval of the land code. That's what I heard the amendment to be.
Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I also support the sense of this proposal, but being aware that there is a time gap between this identification and selection of an evaluation system and the actual implementation and putting in production of an implementation of an evaluation system like we're talking about. That could be weeks or months, which is the end date. And second clarification is, does this apply to all new building projects or only ones that are adjacent to public lands, the riparian corridor, et cetera?
For my purposes, I could be talked out of at some point in time, all new development, but from my purposes, the motion that I made 8 months ago or 6 months, whenever it was, to establish a new protocol or criteria, at least at that moment, and as I sit here this evening, would apply to all proposed new development. Now, I'd want to hear how draconian that is, what all the implications are, but that would be the starting place for me, right? It wouldn't be restricted just to the riparian corridors. It would be, in my mind, strange to adopt an evaluation criteria or process where we say we're only concerned about benefits to our residents and impact on the environment if it's within a narrowly defined geographic area. That ought to be within the city limits of Longmont. It's all residents and it's the environment no matter where the proposal is, or no matter where the proposal would be developed.
Councilmember Finley?
Just have, are you wanting to stop all development, placing a moratorium on all development, whether it's commercial or residential, and for how long a period of time? Is that what is that what the motion is?
Go ahead, Dr. Waters.
I'm not going to use the word moratorium. As far as I'm concerned, we need to take a step back and give our planning staff a chance to finish the work that they've been focused on with a whole lot of distractions for the last 8 months. So I don't have a date certain. We need to take a pause, give them a chance to finish the work. Work that's in the queue would continue to go through the process the way the process has been working. But as of tomorrow, if an application for a permit arrives, it would be put on hold until we had a chance to finish the process that was initiated 8 months ago. That's my intent.
Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I would not be in favor of that. I think it is too draconian to say we're going to stop all development until somebody gets some work done that's already in the queue, seems unreasonable to me, so I will not be voting for this.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Councilmember Waters, I asked 2 questions and got 1 answer. And it may be that the members of the staff, and I think the right ones are actually here, would be the ones who could answer this. But if the system is identified by August 1st, how long before it is implemented and can actually be used to evaluate a proposal? And I think it matters because, you know, if we're talking about, yeah, exactly, lost revenue for the city and lost revenue for people who work in the city, I am for not making triple bottom line errors in our development, absolutely, especially around certain environmentally sensitive parts of the city. But I am, as Councilmember Finley said, not for a 15-month stoppage of new approvals. And so what I want to know is, how long is it going to take to go from selecting this evaluation system or protocol to putting it into practice? Because if that is how long it's going to take, you know, we do have to consider the economic impact on the city. So how long is it going to take? Anybody who has an answer, please.
Mayor,
think-
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I was under the impression this would be a 6 to 8 week pause because that allows the land development code updates, the wildlife management code updates, more discussions of the Strain Drain corridor to take place and to be considered. Right now, they're kind of all over the place. And if we just take a pause, not 18 months, but, you know, a couple of months pause so that we can let things catch up, that would be of benefit to the city and of benefit to everybody working on these projects.
Dr. Waters.
Not knowing how long it's going to take to implement after approval, I don't know how to answer that question. It would seem to me that we've developed a tool that should be able, I don't know that there are huge, I don't know what the operational requirements would be to implement a system for evaluating a new development proposal. So I don't even I don't know how to frame a response for you, other than the fact that we continue to have, we gave direction, we continue to have work introduced and processed. If the staff meets deadlines, then we would have a chance on the 11th of June or thereabouts to review the results of the work that's underway. That has a chance to be embedded in the land code update, and you know it's maybe a 6-week pause. I don't know I don't know how long it would take after that, Councilmember Martin, to implement. But it seems to me it's in all of our interests to accelerate getting the work done, so it's a short pause and it doesn't have big financial implications.
Councilmember Martin.
I certainly agree with all of that. And I am for not starting high-impact projects that have not been evaluated, as we have directed future projects to be evaluated. However, if we're looking for a date certain, I don't know how to vote unless I have an answer to that question. Point of order, Mr. Mayor, is there some reason why nobody in the room here can answer that question unless they're a member of council at this point in the program?
What do you mean? I mean,
Well,
I mean, city
presumably
staff,
we
city
have.
staff can answer.
Yep,
ask
I'm
the
trying
question.
to.
Okay, nobody's offered.
Yeah, so I was going to jump in, actually. I think it's hard to say.
That's my point.
Until it's done. And the example that I will give you is actually the prairie dog ordinance. And So today I was delivered literally a huge sheet in terms of the processes that are required on that. And so until we get final direction on that piece, it's hard for me to answer that question in terms of the time. And so I think I can answer that question more fully potentially next week at the council meeting and have some information for you all on doing this. I think what I indicated to Councilman Waters is we realize this is a priority for council, and we're going to try to move post haste on this issue. I think we had a lot of factors coming in that actually do touch into the staffing issue that he was referencing in terms of how do we adequately staff this, because I think what we've realized is some of these other components that we're trying to manage with the implementation of this ordinance and then the implementation of the IZ ordinance, that's probably taken more time than we assumed it would take in doing that. And so those are the things we're trying to manage right now. But we'll move as quickly as we can. Again, I have some meetings scheduled to try to make sure that maybe we can move in that schedule.
Okay. As I said, I'm for this proposal, but as the city manager just demonstrated, systems efforts never go this fast. So I don't know whether it's an amendment to the motion or what, but my concern is that we set this short-term pause, and which would end, I guess, on the 1st of August. Is that the current proposal? And then at that point, rather than just doing an automatic resumption, which was what would happen if there was no direction about resuming or not, it would just sort of happen. If this evaluation system is not in place and usable, then I think we should talk about resuming things that are not in sensitive areas and defining what a sensitive area that has to have a longer pause is. That's what I've been driving at here. I'm not trying to make trouble, but I think that just saying we're going to delay things until August 1st is not going to be sufficient for the kind of protections that this whole initiative started to get in place.
All right. So we have a full queue, and we're dealing with something that is not even on the agenda. As much as I mean, we're going to be here till 1 o'clock in the morning again. So, Sandy, could you, and I'm not going to cut off debate, but could you please get me the second sheet of public invited to be heard? Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have a couple of questions. In concept, I would be in support of this motion, but I am also worried about what I would consider non-major development applications. For instance, let's say that there is a vacant lot in essentially built-out residential subdivision. We would be pausing on things like that as well?
Yes. As well as far as the motion goes. Okay, so I'm going to start calling off. Okay, we're
Can I just-
yeah.
I just want to finish my thought, though.
You go ahead.
And so I think there does need to be a definition of some sort where we define a level where there has to be some sort of litmus test where we can allow certain applications to continue to go forward that have really no implications to me on what this motion is supposed to address. And so I don't know if I can stand behind a full stop on every single application during the 6-week period.
All right, I'm going to put, okay, so Robert's rule says you get 2 chances to make a comment per topic. That's it, or we're going to be here all night. So I'm going to go through that means you better, no more discussion. It means we say what we're going to say and then make it concise and clear, or save your comment, or save your bullet, save your powder, because I'm only going to call on you twice. Dr. Waters.
So I will stipulate, I'll add to my motion that we review our status the first meeting in August, which is August 4th. We review on August 4th, take stock, and then decide what the next step is if there is one.
Technically, the second has to approve. Okay. So the motion has been amended and currently states that we're going to take a timeout from approving any new residential or commercial development or building projects until August 4th. That is how the motion currently reads. Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I was in the queue to suggest exactly that. But considering that it is infill houses and stuff like that, I wonder if we shouldn't instead make it happen on June 11th, and then scope the moratorium at that time, have it be on the agenda and be an element of serious debate, rather than reviving it after there's been a moratorium on infills and garages and all stuff like that we probably don't need to evaluate with the whole system. And you know, I'm going to vote for this whichever way, but I would be happier evaluating it sooner.
Right. So I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to call point order because nobody else is. The whole point of this particular section is to put something on an agenda for future discussion. So this wasn't intended so what we need to do is put this on an agenda item, right? So then this can be flushed out, talked about, et cetera. Because what's going to happen is we will be here all night every week if we just all of a sudden start bringing things up. I think it's fantastic. I mean, the idea is, I'm not saying whether I'm for or against at this point. I'm just saying that good job. Thanks, Dr. Waters. But let's put it on a future agenda. Let's vote as to whether or not we are going to put this issue as moved and seconded on a future agenda. And then you've got to do we have time? Do we have the ability? What comes off? All that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Because the charter says that mayor gets to adjust the agenda. And so I know people are going to start hating me, but if we do not finish council meeting by 11 o'clock, I'm going to pull this section of the agenda. So if we don't finish by 11 the week before, what that tells me is our workload's too full. So in law, I can be disbarred or held. I mean, the state bar would chastise me or sanction me if I take on too many clients. So if I have too many clients and I think, oh, but I'm doing the work of the people, or I'm helping everybody. If I do, I don't know, halfway work, and I do, it's just that we're not serving anybody. So I'm going to pull this section off the agenda if we're not done by 11 o'clock next week, and we're just going to start that. And also 5 minutes for the presentation coming up from E-Factor. They'll have 5 minutes, so start preparing. All right, Councilmember Finley.
I just can't believe that we would stop all development. If we have an economic development opportunity that requires new construction, they couldn't begin. If we had a prospect that wanted to build in the opportunity zone, that could not begin. Those, with the requirements we already require, things we already require of those folks, that just makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I understand that you want this process in place and that you've been overly patient waiting for it, but I don't think this is how we fix it.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
I call the question because once again, we're trying to just get it on the agenda, so we need to vote.
All right, so are there any other comments rather than, there's no second, but I don't think there's anybody else in the queue, which is the same thing as calling the question. So we'll just take it as a polite Mayor Pro Tem reminding us, let's get on with it. So let's vote. We're putting a timeout, we're putting a timeout on all on all city approval of residential and commercial developments and redevelopments until August 4th. That is the motion. And can we clear the vote thing real quick? So so I'm not going to vote for it only because the things that I don't want to discuss it. But the thing is that I don't want to be reviewing each project and it also interferes, I don't know about use by right, et cetera, but it could be,
Is it on a
Problematic.
future agenda or
we're
is
putting it on a future agenda. This is just going on a future agenda.
Okay.
Whether or not we're gonna talk about this in the future. No, I'm sorry. This is a motion to just put it on a future agenda to discuss it. We're not saying do it, we're saying put it on agenda to discuss it.
Okay. And the one thing, when we look at development services,
Mm-hmm.
we have different components of it. So we also have a component of development services so building inspection, for
So
example.
those are all things that we'll talk about. You're gonna tell us.
Correct. I want to tell council, I'm going to nuance between those operational components because I think we generally talk about development applications, but there are applications that don't necessarily touch the folks that are going to be working on the item that we're talking about. So I'll need to nuance that piece.
Just explain it on the next agenda
Correct.
when it comes up.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm actually gonna vote to talk about it. So anyway, let's just go. Vote. All right, have we all pressed? All right, that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Finley against. All right, we will talk about that on a future occasion. Dr. Waters?
I had a third
Yeah.
item. Hopefully this will be a little more straightforward. At our last meeting, I was on the prevailing side of a vote on item 11D, which was consideration of the draft ordinances related to downtown Longmont. The item specifically was discussion and feedback regarding draft changes to come back to the council. There were two proposals. One was on a smoking restriction, a restricted smoking area. The second was on the application or the utilization and then the enforcement of components from our land code, the public land code, to downtown. Now, I will confess that as I read the materials in preparation for that meeting, I didn't get as far as the information packet. Typically, I do, but I didn't last Tuesday night. And what I didn't realize is that all the supporting materials I was looking for that agenda item were in that packet, not in our board packet. Now, maybe I'm the only one that missed it, but I don't recall getting a heads up that all the supporting information was in the information packet, which we never talk about. So had I seen that information relative to that item, I would have voted differently on that item. So I'm moving now for reconsideration of that item to come back to council.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. And Ms. Gomez, could you please get us the queue back up? Thank you. After we vote, of course. So we voted to not continue, we voted, 4 of us voted for the smoking ban. 4 of us shot down the need for city staff to put into ordinance form tools that the police were asking in order to make downtown safer, more palatable, et cetera, et cetera. Dr. Waters was in the prevailing side, which was to not continue forward. Now he has made the motion to reconsider that, which will put us to a place exactly where we were before we voted on it. So if we vote on it, it just is erased and goes back. And if somebody wants to change and make a motion for the new vote, anyone can do that. But Dr. Waters, being on the prevailing side, is permitted to make that motion. It has been seconded. Let's vote. All right, that passes 6-1 with Mayor Pro Tem against. I presume, is there another motion or no? Dr. Waters, any more motion? We're just back to, we just did it to, do you want to do the other one?
No, so my motion, then I would move that item, I would assume my motion would be to bring it back to the next agenda.
Let's make that motion.
That is my motion.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
So the motion is bring it back on the next agenda and let's vote on it. Great. Let's vote.
Did you mean the first reading?
Yep.
First reading?
We're back to exactly where we were before.
But
we voted
not
on it.
bringing back as a conversation.
No, bring it back as first ordinance. We're back, just like we were before we voted on first ordinance. Bring it back, and we will revote on that ordinance. We will discuss it, and if somebody makes a motion to pass the ordinance, we'll do it. If not, then we won't.
Okay.
But it goes on the agenda. Does that make sense? You look pained, Mr. May.
I think what we're trying to find is, so we had the process that we developed where we bring these ordinances for a draft ordinance for a conversation.
So whatever it was, I don't have the agenda in front of
It
me,
was
whatever it was last time, right before the vote, copy and paste whatever that agenda was,
It's
and
a
we'll
draft
revisit it.
ordinance for consideration.
Then that'll be draft ordinance for consideration.
Correct.
All right, that motion passes 6-1 with Mayor Pro Tem against. All right. Can I get the cue, please? All right, well, Mayor Pro Tem.
On April 2nd, I brought forth a suggestion, a motion that we, on the upcoming ballot, we put an item to increase city council's wages. Since they have not been increased for close to 20 years. I was told that that would be coming forth on a future agenda, and it hasn't. So now I am making a motion, and I would like a second, that we make that a ballot issue, that we bring it forth for discussion, to put it on the ballot this November for the people to vote on. Do I have a second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Anyone want to chime in? Regardless of how I vote in the end, if this passes, I am not going to accept a pay increase. Not because, for no other reason than I think it provides additional oomph. Because I do think city council needs more money. I just don't want to be the one to ask for it. Mayor Pro Tem Christensen.
Okay, this is this is all up to the city, the people of the city. If they don't want to pay us more, they don't have to pay us more. However, once every 20 years, it seems like we should get a raise. Because you get what you pay for. And if you want, this is a working class town, if you want a working class voice, then you have to be able to make it possible for working class people to serve on this board. People are not ever required to take their salary. They can contribute it to the general fund, they can contribute it to the contingency fund, they can contribute it to the charity of their choice. Anyway, I do think this is necessary. This will only apply to the next council and anybody finishing out their term. So it will not apply, it doesn't even take place until this fall, this fall's vote. So it will take place, it will be applicable to any new council members. And the idea would be, it would be indexed to the cost of living index like Social Security, so that this doesn't continue to be an issue for the next 20 years.
All right, nobody's left in the queue. Let's vote. The motion is to put this on a future agenda to discuss putting a ballot measure on the ballot to increase city council's pay. And the mayor, I presume. Dr. Waters, not the mayor. Go ahead.
Just a point of clarification. This is a motion to bring it back?
To bring it back.
On an
Just to
agenda.
put it on the future agenda to have this discussion.
Is that,
We can't, we're not moving anything now. The council, the council rules state that we have to put it on an agenda. So it's just to put it on an agenda, and we will make that decision, how much, if any, et cetera. We'll talk about it. Okay, let's vote. All right, that passes 6-1 with Dr. Waters against. All right. So, city manager's report.
No report. The one thing I will say is tonight we've added a few items to the agenda. And so when we look at the timing of these agendas and the timing for the discussion, if it is council's desire to continue trying to manage that length, that does create other issues in terms of what we bring back and other items that we're considering. And so you and I will have to have that conversation.
So again,
in terms of
right.
these
So
issues.
one, again, if we don't finish by 11, nothing else goes on the agenda ever, right? That's number one. Number two, the, council direction is you get the list, you've got a bucket of stuff that we've asked you to do, and those that are most important get put up here. And if there's not time for the lesser important ones, we don't bring it back until there is time. So this doesn't mean that you go from a 40 to a 60-hour work week. It means that you put it on the list. Okay?
Just saying we
And
need to have the
and
conversation.
We'll work on it.
Yep.
Okay? All right. All right, next, special reports and presentations. It's a presentation by an Entrepreneurship for All, i.e. E4All, an entrepreneurial development organization regarding planned operations in Longmont. Sir, good seeing you guys again. I might seem like a meanie tonight. It's just that you got 5, if that.
We're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks for having us tonight. My name is David Parker. I'm the CEO of Entrepreneurship for All.
My name is Harris Rollinger. I'm the Executive Director of Entrepreneurship for All Colorado.
So we got 5 minutes. Off we go. On the screen is Danaris Mazzara. She lives in Lawrence, Massachusetts, a economically challenged city, and she is from the Dominican Republic. After the last recession, she and her husband both were laid off and went on full government assistance. Danaris wanted to get out of that situation. Her mom brought her some food stamps. She took the food stamps and bought ingredients for flan instead of getting food directly for her family. And she baked up a whole bunch of flan and sold it. And thus was born an entrepreneur. However, she was making these out of her home and without any permits, and so she could only grow the business so far. She then went to Entrepreneurship for All, or E4All, which is the program that we represent, and got help in a bunch of different ways. We have pitch contests. I'm sure many people in this room are aware of Shark Tank. Think of a localized version of that, where nobody's allowed to be mean, and people are congratulated for the bravery of sharing their business ideas, and they get a chance to win some money. They're great events. Danaris and all of the other entrepreneurs that we have hosted have come through pitch contests and had a chance to win some money. And then we immediately transfer them into applying for an accelerator program. This is a program that gives these entrepreneurs a year-long sort of bear hug, a chance for them to move forward with their ideas with tremendous amount of community support. So the quick rundown of how they get help is they get mentors. So each entrepreneur gets 3 mentors from the community, usually business folks, who act as a board of directors to help them get in the right direction. They get the benefit of being in a cohort. So there's 15 entrepreneurs together who share experiences with one another. They get training from local experts in the community to help them with all the different hats that entrepreneurs have to wear. And lastly, we give them some money. So we literally give them grant money to help them get their businesses underway, because these are typically ideas that are very localized in concept, and professional investors are not interested in trying to make money from them. The average amount of money is $1,300 per entrepreneur. Danaris went through our program and went from being, making a little bit of money and bursting at the seams in her house to now having a full-blown bakery in her downtown. She actually owns the building with a mortgage and is bursting at the seams from that building. She has 13 employees, including her husband, and is looking to grow into a new space and hold on to that original building. So a tremendous example of a success for a person and for a community. We have a program now completely in Spanish. Danaris speaks both English and Spanish. She went through our English program because we had not yet developed A Para Todos. This is a program that we would like to bring to Longmont and go back and forth every 6 months, starting a program, one in English, and 6 months later, another program in Spanish. There would be, all the mentors for the Spanish program would be bilingual and or be able to speak directly in Spanish. The same with the management and all the consultants or the experts who come in to talk to the entrepreneurs. We are doing this currently in one of our cities in Massachusetts, and then we have a program fully in Spanish in Lawrence. Where
Just a heads up, 60 seconds.
Got it.
Okay. So in terms of our income sources and typically how we raise money, the cost of the program for the entrepreneur is zero. It is entirely free, which means that we have to raise money in order to keep it so. It costs $300,000 a year for us to run our program, which includes 2 staff members, as well as program costs and overhead. This is a really lean program that we've developed over the course of a number of years, and we feel like it's worth every single penny. In terms of the current support that we have, we receive support from a local family foundation. Brad Feld and the Foundry Group have both made significant contributions. The Economic Development Partnership, the Longmont DDA, the Longmont Chamber, and the Longmont Community Foundation are all either involved or have pledged support. And what we're seeking from City Council is we've raised a significant amount of money in order for us to get ready for year 1, but we need help in terms of closing the gap. And so we're asking for $80,000 from City Council.
80,000? All right, great. Thank you very much. Any questions from council? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to first call. That worked fairly well. All right, let's move on to first call, public invited to be heard. So just as a reminder, everyone will have 3 minutes. We do what you say if you take less than a minute. No, just kidding. So you have 3 minutes. And at that point, no matter what we think of what you're saying, good, bad, love it, hate it, I'll have to actually cut you off. So let's go ahead and start. Please say your name and address when you come to the podium. We got Hank Grayson, 1033 Katy Lane. Good seeing you again, sir.
Hi, good evening. My name's Hank Grayson. I live at 1033 Katy Lane. Thank you for taking time to meet this afternoon. Unfortunately, I got pulled away as soon as I got there. And thank you, Councilman Waters, for meeting with us the other time. And thank you, Marcia, for your guidance. I really like Longmont. I could live anywhere. That's the nature of my practice. And I choose this place. I think it's the jewel of the Front Range, okay? And it reminds me of my wonder years, bucolic youth, in the 1960s, growing up in suburban Long Island. But back to Pike. I understand your staff is good intentioned, but they're looking at it in a two-dimensional way. We recognize there's a great demand for people. People want to ride on Pike. And a lot of times they ride at 50 miles an hour and there's no traffic. It's a great cut through. And more people want to ride, so why not build it out? But what we should do is divert the traffic with the southern route. Pike is the only street north of Niwot. So that's what drives the traffic. And if you want to expand Pike to put a bike lane, it's not safe. I lost a very good friend on a bike lane riding next to traffic. Okay, got run over by a little old lady in a van. And I'm sure she was a nice little old lady, but she killed him. So I think it's much safer to run the bike lane through the trees instead of over the trees. And if you're on a mission to expand the road to a 4-lane expressway, there's at least 20 feet on the north side. So I don't even understand why we're talking about taking the trees down unless you want to stick it to Kiki. And I know he's difficult. So if you want to ride your dragon through our neighborhood and take out the trees, we will remember. And we're not Liberty Mutual. We could hold a grudge. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Ryan.
Hi there. Thank you, mayors and council members. I appreciate having the time to talk. And I've never done anything like this before. I've usually just been able to vote and talk, and not really actually come to city council to advocate for something. So this is really kind of new and weird for me. And I can't believe that I'm nervous because I teach and I speak in front of students, like hundreds of students at my university. So this is bizarre. Anyway, I live at Tempted Ways. I spent the first 10 years that I lived in Longmont. Again, I live here as a choice as well. I spent my first 10 years on Sherman Street. I was 3 houses from 3rd. I'm very familiar with living near a busy street. I'm not opposed to living near a busy street. I'm just asking that there be mitigation in place for the busy street. And I'm also talking about Pike Road. I really applaud the changes, the minimal changes that have been made into the plan that was initially there, but I would argue they're not enough. When Pike was first developed, it was farmlands. There were no housing developments around it. Those have been allowed to take in place, and so as a result, it's densely populated, and the changing nature demands changed plans. As I've been advocating since first writing to my council member, Marsha Martin, back in September. The speed limit on Pike is too fast. I've seen bad accidents. I've seen animals killed. I haven't seen any people killed, but it's only a matter of time. At the very most, we have 119, which is a state highway through downtown. The speed limit there is 35 miles an hour. It's faster on Pike, and that's going through neighborhoods. That's problematic for me. There also, I would say, I love the fact that you've added a stop traffic light at Kaufman, but there are other streets on Pike that also need access, such as Pratt or the Rainbow Ridge community, and nothing has been provided for them, and so there's not going to be any way for them to get in and out, especially with this increased traffic, if we have the expansion that takes place. I would agree that the bicyclists need a physical protection, not pylons. That's just not safe on a street of that busyness, and I would argue that we need to preserve the trees and maybe have a bike lane on the south side of the street in contrast to the north side of the street where there already is a multi-use path. And then finally, I would ask that you not have a double left turn lane from 287 onto Pike, which I know is driving all of this conversation. There are no other east-west roads in Longmont off of 287 that have a double left turn lane. Pike is the only one at the moment that is being asked to do this, and it's a 2-lane road, which seems to me to be wrong if you're not doing the same sort of thing on 119 or on Highway 66. I was there tonight during rush hour. I made a point of leaving early so that I could see what the traffic looked like. There were 2 cars waiting at the stoplight. 2 cars waiting to turn left. My husband goes every morning up to Greeley. He works at the University of Northern Colorado. He never sees these huge lanes. I mean, he's going there during rush hour. He has to be on campus sometimes at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'm wondering that if this is being done as kind of a way to kind of turn Pike into a 4-lane road, they'll get the 2-lane highway, and so we get more people on it, that will turn it into a 4-lane road rather than actually responding to real demand. I've heard us refer to, I live in Prospect, and I've heard us refer to a tiny spoiled enclave. We're not. I'm not saying not in my backyard. Am I out of time?
You are.
Okay.
But thank you. We loved
no.
what you said. We loved what you said. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Susan Fulkerson.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and City Council members. My name is Susan Fulkerson, and I live at 833 Incorrigible Circle. I have lived in the Prospect neighborhood for almost 20 years. For the last 20 years, I have driven Highway 87 southbound, northbound, taking my children to school. I also drive Pike Road multiple times a day as I commute back and forth to Boulder. I'm here tonight to ask you to vote no on the Pike Road expansion project, and here are the reasons why. 1, until we as a community change our mindset and make pedestrians, cyclists, and public transportation the priority, and cars secondary, we are putting a $3 million Band-Aid on the problem with Pike Road. If we as a community really want to make our roads multimodal, then we need to think of the safety and well-being of the people, the cyclists, and the people that live there first, then the cars. I believe at the last City Council meeting, CDOT was complaining of the long line at 287 and Pike. Well, if car-centric commuters do not want to wait in line, then they need to rethink their driving habits. We need to take a stand and say no to more cars zipping in our neighborhoods at unsafe speeds to get from point A to point B. I have seen many accidents on Pike Road, and it's because people are driving way too fast. The second thing that I think this Pike project, expansion project, has not addressed is what is going to happen at Pike and Hover. Right now, it's congested, it's backed up. We have 3 public schools that are experiencing growth. We have the Front Range College that's growing. We have an RTD bus doing circles in that area. We have the pod storage that is being built with semi-trucks now on our highway and 600 more apartments coming. Where are we going to go? I mean, it's going to get them off 287 and onto Pike. Third, I really don't think that all creative options have been explored with objective outside experts. We have an opportunity here to kind of knock it out of the park with innovative street design, and this plan does not do it. I would have started with what's beautiful on that street. It's the 58 trees. I've waited 20 years. The north side of Pike has never been beautified. It's looked the same way for 20 years. So I ask that before we start taking out the beauty that we do have, let's just kind of think about that. What I would like to see is Pike Road repaved, road gutters to help with drainage, maybe a bit more road space for bikes on the north side, and let's beautify that north side so it's pleasant. It makes people happier. And if I could really get my wish list, it would be to add crosswalks with lights, kind of like how Boulder does. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Conlon?
Hello, Scott Conlon, 1014 Fifth Avenue, current board chair for Transportation Advisory Board, board member, Bicycle Longmont. I'm not speaking for either, but I'm speaking with the experience of both. So, Mayor, City Council, I'd like to speak about two transportations in front of you, the Pike Road Improvement Plan and the bicycle dismounts at crosswalks. So first, Pike Road, I'd like to speak in favor of the proposed plan, revised with buffered bike lanes and narrowed traffic lanes from South Sunset to South Main Street. I believe that additional traffic light at South Kaufman will aid those turning left out of the Prospect neighborhood or into it with less conflict on the Pike Road traffic. The addition of buffered bike lanes and other multimodal aspects supports several different goals of the comprehensive Envision Longmont plan and the enhanced multi-use corridor plan. I'd like to thank all those who worked on that, both of those plans and other comprehensive plans to create a cohesive approach to transportation across the city. Pike Road will now be able to serve slower road users, such as cyclists, e-bike riders, to make a safe connection between South Sunset and South Main Streets. The consistent treatment of these lanes will make the experience for motorists and other users safer and more predictable. Improved road facilities for these users will mean more people in this corridor other than just motorists. Improvements such as turn pockets, bus stops, crosswalks, traffic speed indicator signs, and full curbing will also contribute to this improved experience. By having a buffered bike lane alongside the traffic lane, it is easier and safer for all to have traffic managed at the traffic lights and otherwise have the right-of-way across Pike. Recreational users of the multi-use path will still be able to enjoy their space without concern of faster-moving riders moving in both directions. I do believe the plan still needs more detail in the treatment of bus stops, particularly west of Ridgeview Drive, as there doesn't seem to be a crosswalk to help support the neighborhood to access to the westbound buses. As for cyclists, dismounting at crosswalks. I believe that Longmont should be more consistent in its treatment of users and follow the example of many other area towns. Longmont applies the term sidewalk and side path to different areas of the city, but yet the code does not help users differentiate these. Just as a pedestrian would like to have the right of way to cross a crosswalk without stopping on permissive light or when the right of way is in their favor, so too should a cyclist. I also ask that stop signs and stop bars on crossing roads be placed before the sidewalks and side paths to help reinforce who has the right of way in these instances. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Devin Quintz.
Devin Quintz, 911 Venice Street. Thank you for the opportunity to talk, Mayor and Council. I would just like to say, when it comes to crosswalks, I agree with Scott that we need to step up and follow what every other ordinance or every other community around us does and what the state dropped in 2010. So in essence, we're going against what the state has on their ordinance books when it comes to crosswalks and having to dismount and cross as a pedestrian. Regarding Pike Road, the people want the traffic to be slower on Pike Road. having multimodal opportunities, people walking, bicycling, the road designs naturally will, I hate to use the word force, but encourage drivers to drive slower and more cautious, because drivers will drive as fast as the road is designed, and it makes them feel comfortable. Bigger roads, bigger speeds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sarah Breaker?
Hello, Mayor, City Council. My name is Sarah Breaker. I live at 743 Sunset Street, and I'm here today to express my support for the bicycle lanes on Pike Road. As someone who regularly uses a bicycle to make short trips and exercise around Longmont, I believe strongly that the benefits to bike lanes extend beyond the obvious increased safety to bike riders. Bike infrastructure encourages more riders, improving traffic conditions and reducing our community's carbon footprint. Bikes are good for the health of individuals, for the environment, for the local economy, and for tourism. Bike lanes can also benefit those who do not have access to another mode of transportation and who need a bike route through Longmont to get to work, school, a bus, or run errands. I believe that supporting something that will improve the lives of my neighbors, even if it's something I may not use, is meaningful and not an injustice. For example, I don't have children, but I support parks and playgrounds because they're important to the people who make up my community. Arguing against bike lanes for the sake of a roadside feature that will be replaced is arguing against the opportunity for people to have a safe, accessible, and convenient way to navigate Longmont by bike. Prospect is a new urbanist community, and new urbanist streets are designed for people rather than cars and to accommodate multimodal transportation. I encourage council to move forward with this project because Longmont is a place where we provide safe access for people on bikes, and that the concerns of a few, while important to recognize, should not outweigh the benefits to so many.
Thank you. Barry Fulkerson.
Hello, City Council. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Barry Fulkerson. I do live in Prospect. I have for 20 years. Okay, sorry about that. Yep. Appreciate this opportunity. Anyways, my concern with this project is what's been stated already. The increase of this thoroughfare is going to cost about $3 million starting out. My concern is that it's going to grow above that, of course, when you're widening the road, you're moving the utilities, you're adding the sewage and drainage to both sides of the road and increasing the width. For this, and not only to mention the removal of the 60 trees, have we considered the other lower cost opportunities, which would be if the impetus for this whole project is to add the double turn lane off of 287 westbound onto Pike, can we extend that as a single turn lane? If you add the double turn lane, of course, you double the flow of traffic, which will increase the number of cars. I can tell you from somebody who's been turning left onto Pike for many years, having an opening to turn is a challenge in the morning. So would like you to please reconsider a lower cost option than what we're facing right now. Thank you.
Bradford Zach, or Zach Bradford? I'm guessing it's Bradford Zach.
Bradford Zach at 730 Tenacity and Prospect. Thank you again for the chance to address you. I wish to add something to my remarks from my last visit, and that is concerning the bike lanes and the road expansion. It looks like the state is going to contribute $683,000 to this project. That's about the cost of your provision of two types of bike lanes. Adding a bike lane to the existing road is about 3 times the cost of an improved sidewalk. And in this paper, I go through where I get some of these notes from, but I think it's redundant to have two forms of bike lanes on this road that is already being contested about for all various reasons that you've heard about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Craig Stevens.
Hi, my name's Craig Stevens. I live at 722 Tenacity Drive in Prospect. And I've been talking with my neighbors in Prospect, and actually Bradford is my neighbor. He lives right next door. But actually, I'm speaking actually in favor of the plan that I've seen based on the Prezi presentation and other documents that the city of Longmont has provided. We can't sit back and expect things to improve on Pike Road unless we do something about Pike Road. There's nothing we can do to stop development in Longmont. We need to manage it. And I think this Pike proposal that the city has put forward is a good first step. I would like to see, everyone's been talking about trees being cut down, but no one's talked about the new trees that are going to be planted to replace the ones that are currently on the road. So we shouldn't wait. We need to do something now because Pike Road is dangerous. The intersection of Pike and Main Street is dangerous. There's a lot of accidents there. I know it because I live right there, and I can see the intersection from my condo in Prospect. I would like to just express my support for the city and what they've planned so far. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, Brock Turpening or Turpening? Sorry, Brooke. Sorry, Brooke. I know you. I was like, that's very similar to, okay, Brooke. Hi, Brooke, with an E.
Hi, my name is Brooke Turpening. I live at 918 Plateau Road. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Honorable Council. My husband and I are also avid cyclists. I am also the chair of the Prospect Tree Committee. One of the reasons we moved to Longmont was for the cycling as well as the trees. I want to save trees, but I also want to be clear that I am not opposed to bike lanes. I am opposed to taking out trees that Prospect has cared for and nurtured for 25 years to widen Pike for on-street bike lanes. On-street bike lanes on arterial roads are dangerous. A study in the Denver region bears this out. 67% of bicycle crashes occurred on arterials. 10% of arterials were fatal, as Mr. Grayson unfortunately has learned. 9% of crashes on arterials occurred where speeds were over 30 miles per hour. What is the speed going to be on Pike Road? I believe it's 40 miles an hour. Off-street bike lanes, on the other hand, are much safer. An existing off-street bike lane already exists on the south side of Pike. Widen it. Make it multimodal. Make it safer, but widen it. Do not put on-street bike lanes on an arterial. The city cannot even tell us how wide those bike lanes are going to be on Pike Lane. But I can tell you one thing. Right now, 18-wheeler trucks are flying down Pike going to the pod facility from Main Street. I would ask the council tonight to make a motion and vote to investigate alternatives, creative alternatives, forward-looking alternatives to on-street bike paths on arterials. Longmont and its citizens deserve better than cookie-cutter lanes, bike lanes on these streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Dave Bartel? Just a reminder, if we could state your name and record, or name and address for the record, that'd be great.
My name is Dave Bartell, 2001 Ridgeview Drive. I'm the president of the Creekside Homeowners Association. And we've had a chance to visit and talk to several of our members. I think it's important to note that I moved to Creekside in 1990. The worst traffic we saw back then were 2 tractors and I think a hay wagon. All right. Things have changed a lot. I've seen a lot happen within the neighborhoods. And at that time, we've gone from 2 neighborhoods, Rainbow Ridge and Creekside, now all the way up to 6 when you count Southmore Park. So the dynamics that are affecting Pike Road are extremely important in my mind. And what bothered me after attending and bothered our association after attending the meetings, the informational meetings, was the lack of pure data and understanding of where they're coming up with the plan. Certain things that we were asking for as far as traffic volumes. How did they increase? What did you use? What dynamics are you putting into your formulas to come up with the plan that you have? They couldn't answer that. The closest we got to it was a staff member saying, I used 2017 data and bumped it by 6%. That's not the way this road should be looked at, in my mind. I want to look at some good empirical data that staff should be able to offer to all of the neighborhoods. So what we are asking from a homeowners association is to involve all the stakeholders. We have a chance. We really do believe we have a chance. And the Creekside Homeowners Association is more than willing to work with the city and with the planners to come up with an overall plan. We're concerned that the current plan as it sits today is a Band-Aid. Yes, it's gonna have certain things that will enhance the road, the bicycling and all the rest of it, but the overall plan and the thoughts going into it with new development toward the west, with a new commercial, the college, and now over 240 residential units going in down there, how does that impact the overall plan? And I've not heard one staff member address that when that question came up. So I think we have an opportunity, council. I really do. And we would urge you to either postpone the vote on this or deny it, and let's come up with a plan and a committee of stakeholders to get together and figure this out, because we got a lot of knowledge in this community. And our HOA is sure willing to work with it. So we are asking you to please reconsider this, take a look at that, and look at all the data points, because we can't find them. Maybe you guys have, we haven't. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. Laura Wallace?
Okay, can everyone hear me? Good evening. My name is Laura Wallace, and I live at 1008 Katy Lane in the Prospect neighborhood. And the backyard of our property abuts the alley that is parallel to Pike Road. The only buffer that is currently protecting us from the noise and pollution of ever-increasing traffic on Pike is a nice, wide sidewalk and a few rows of trees, one row of which the Pike Improvement Plan seeks to take down in order to widen the road to accommodate turn lanes and buffered bicycle lanes. I'd like to thank the city staff and our precinct councilperson, Marcia Mason, for organizing public meetings that allowed citizens from the surrounding neighborhoods on Pike Road to express our concerns and discuss issues about the project. Our voices appear to have been heard regarding some of the safety issues that we believed needed to be addressed if this project was to go forward. We understand that a traffic signal will be installed at the intersection of Pike and South Kaufman, and that will allow neighborhood traffic to safely enter Pike and allow for protected time for pedestrians and school children to cross the street. Also, speed traffic displays, we've been told, will be set up on Pike in both directions to show drivers their actual speed and hopefully encourage them to better adherence with speed limits. What remains as an important issue is access for bicyclists safe access for bicyclists along Pike Road. And we don't believe that's been adequately addressed. We hope that you've all had the opportunity to view the video prepared by Randy Hoffman, one of our neighbors in Prospect, and he lights an innovative way for the city to address Longmont's multimodal aspirations as part of this improvement plan. He recommends that rather than widening Pike along the distance from Main Street to Sunset with buffered bike lanes, it would be better to install dedicated bike lanes next to existing sidewalks within the current right-of-way rather than in the road. This solution to allow safe travel for both pedestrians and bicycles has been successfully demonstrated in other places. One that I want to pick out is along Broadway in Boulder, all along the property of CU, where there are parallel concrete paths, divided and clearly stenciled, one for pedestrians and one for bicycles. This solution should be something I would encourage the city of Longmont to examine and perhaps emulate. I'm not a bike rider, but the bike riders that I talk to would rather travel on a protected bike lane than join the traffic on the road.
Thank you, ma'am. Mary Ann Riggy.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and city council members. My name is Mary Ann Rigai, and I live at 70 21st Avenue in Longmont, Colorado. So I decided I want to talk about trees. I am in a scientific field, speech pathology, and I love trees, and I love most of us do. And I just want to talk about the beauty of trees and what they do for us, what they provide. And when I lived in Pennsylvania, we had many pine trees and spruce and many green trees and blue spruce, and we also had maple, oak, and elm. And now in Colorado, I love the aspen trees. I read about them, and they live at 5,000 to 10,000 feet altitude, and they're beautiful trees, and they're very unique in what they do. And just in general, trees provide oxygen. So when there's a grove of trees, they provide more oxygen to that area. And every living creature, including human beings, needs oxygen. So when trees are cut down a lot, and many trees are cut down, I'm not saying in any particular situation, but when they are, there's less oxygen in that area. There's less ability for other life to thrive because they provide moisture. Like when trees when they have snow on them and the snow melts, the moisture falls to the ground and it provides moisture for other living things. It goes into the earth. And many of us know this already. I just wanted to talk about it and how beautiful trees are and how difficult it is to replace trees and to grow new ones because it takes a long time for most trees, to grow to their full maturity as trees that are 20 or 30 years old. And that's all I have to say right now, so thank you for listening. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Mary Ann. Pam Hora.
You're welcome.
Or I guess Pam Ora, depending on.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and council members. I'm Pam Hora. I live at 2220 Frontier Street here in Longmont. My office is located at Pike and South Sunset, so I regularly travel on Pike Road, and so I enjoy the benefit of being able to live and work here in Longmont. I was discouraged to hear about the fact that the vote was put off on the IGA with CDOT to fund the funding for Pike Road improvements, and so that's why I decided I wanted to come tonight to speak to you. Your planning and engineering staff have worked hard through the years to plan for our future for our community and to make it a great place that we live in. Part of that plan was making sure that we would have a good transportation network. Pike Road has always been designated as an arterial street here in Longmont, and it's functioning as an arterial and will continue to function as an arterial. I would like to see it function as a more effective and safe arterial that takes into consideration vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians.
The Pike Road Improvements Project will help to do that, but it needs funding in order to make that happen. And so I'd ask that you move forward with approving the IGA with CDOT, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Rebecca Stadler.
Hello, Mayor Bagley, City Council members. Happy spring. My name is Rebecca Stadler, and I live at 2031 Diamond Drive in Rainbow Ridge. I thank the city for accepting resident input and modifying the plans for Pike Road to include a traffic signal at Kaufman Street. Thank you also to council members and Mayor Bagley who have taken time out of their busy schedules to meet with concerned residents. However, I still do not understand how the 2 lanes merging into one will do anything but to bottleneck traffic. GPS apps like Waze will just dump cars onto Pike as long as it is a shorter travel time than Ken Pratt. I respectfully ask the council to consider tabling this project for the time being. Construction has begun on the widening of 95th Street from Plateau to Lookout. Balfour Senior Living has started breaking ground at Hover and Pike. Silos at Creekside Apartments will follow. If the city implements the Pike Road 287 project, the neighborhoods of Watersong, Farm at Creekside, Rainbow Ridge Estates, and Prospect will be surrounded by road construction on all 4 sides simultaneously. Postponing this project will allow time for some more thoughtful consideration of options that would make residents, motorists, and cyclists happy. Our number 1 objective is safety, with traffic mitigation and efficiency a close second. I believe both objectives can be accomplished in a more creative fashion than the plan we have today. I would also like to talk a little bit about CDOT. I think there should be more collaboration with CDOT for a better plan that would not require Longmont to bear the economical brunt of this project. The problem is not Pike, it's 287. I would argue that there are more options that could save our city money and put the onus on the state to fix this regional traffic problem. The idea of on-street bike lanes are very laudable, but it needs more study and consideration. Pike Road is not only zoned for residential, but the new addition of the pod storage facility means that we now have wide trucks on the road. Once the bike lanes are added, the road will be 1 foot narrower for these trucks to pass alongside cyclists. This seems like a very dangerous situation, especially with the speed limit still at 40 miles per hour. With no police speed enforcement on this road, I almost always have cars passing me far over the speed limit. Please do not put cyclists at risk. Residents have been asking for a long time to lower the speed limit to 35. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Charles Gravel.
Charles Gravel, 2040 Summit View Drive. I'm in the Creekside neighborhood. I'm here, of course, to discuss a few aspects of the 287 Pike project. A friend of mine who lives in Rainbow Ridge actually took some time and talked to CDOT for an extended time. So here's some information I would like to pass along to you. They said that the new traffic signal pattern has helped with safety at the intersection, so it is not as urgent as it was before. I believe much of our safety information at the intersection is older data before the phasing had changed on that. However, it still has congestion and backup on the left turn during rush hour, so it is listed as an important project. If the grant fund was not approved at this time, the funds would likely be available later, as it will still be near the top of the list for those types of funds. In fact, CDOT did not think they would even get to it until late this year or early next year. Asked if Longmont did not initiate this, would they do anything? They said they would wait a few years, but eventually they would put in those 2 lanes. Please take this into consideration. We need to get this information from CDOT, not from me through CDOT or my neighbors through CDOT, not through them, CDOT. Let's do a study. Let's get everyone together and do this together. This information that is new since last week means we have time to get this right for Longmont, not just for the commuters. A second issue to think about was brought up already, the fact that we're going to have construction this summer all around those different areas. If we pushed this back to do it right, we'd be able to mitigate that situation. Additionally, we do not know the full impact of the new construction at Pike and Hover, as was mentioned. The pods trucks are just now starting to add to traffic, as well as the new residential and other stuff. Why don't we wait and actually get real data from that to see what we can do, and not do this as a two-step project and guess what needs to be there? We seem to be guessing what's going to happen, not actually finding out what real data is. Longmont, let's see. Longmont will be spending about $2 million to help commuter traffic from Weld County to Boulder. Why not spend this money on quieter railroad crossings, new polar ice rink down deposit, something like that? All this is doing is helping commuter traffic. Let the state and county deal with widening Highway 52 instead. As mentioned, as soon as you widen any road, a GPS will just route more traffic through it. Then we're paying for maintenance and snow removal for other people that are not really helping our city. So I ask you to delay this project, get proper input from all the neighborhoods and CDOT as well, and from the Longmont residents, and do it properly in a year or so from now with the proper bike lanes and everything. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Ruth Thompson.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Ruth Thompson. I live at 1921 Ridgeview in Creekside, just off of Pike. I am here tonight to plead with you to not approve the current plan for Pike expansion. You've heard tonight from my neighbors who want safe bike lanes, but say that the ones that are not on the road are safer, the ones that are protected by a row of trees, for example. You've heard that we don't want to increase traffic and that we have a lot of concerns about this expansion. You are our elected officials, and you are supposed to represent the best interest of the people who elected you. Please represent us the way representative government is supposed to work, and do not approve the current plan. Please, please, please do not allow the killing of our beautiful trees. We haven't figured out a way for the trees to vote, so we, the people who live in the neighborhood, who have watched our trees grow from saplings, who take evening strolls just to walk down this beautiful stretch of sidewalk in Prospect, who love our trees, have gathered here to lobby on their behalf. Please hear our voices. Please protect our trees and our neighbors and our bicyclists, and do not approve this current plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Looks like it's a twofer. Gregor and Kristen Mecca. Gregor, don't be shy. Come on. Too shy?
Kristen and Greg Mecca, 1314 Ruby Way. I was trying to get him to speak on our behalf, but apparently he thinks this is a growth moment for me. So
Grow on. Grow on.
Because this is not my thing. I just wanted to say, first off, I'm really moved by all of our neighbors' eloquent pleas to not approve this current plan. And I'm in agreement. And I'm adamantly against the proposed solution for Pike. And it's for safety reasons. I don't know if any of you have paid attention to what's going on now at the west end of Pike because of that double turn lane. Holy cow, it's drag racing, it's aggressive driving, it's a nightmare. And I actually get really nervous and really frustrated every time I have to be at that left turn green and just have to deal with everything that happens as soon as it goes green. It's like...
It reminds me of Italy and all the little scooters that just ripping around. It's kind of a free-for-all.
And I can imagine that the east side is going to be the same thing, but worse because it's going to be a shorter period to have to do it all. I also wanted to say, living in Rainbow Ridge, it's ridiculously hard to pull out of our neighborhood as it is, safely and timely. And then I think of a lot of us go through Creekside to avoid that, and that's not supposed to be a through street. and then we're negatively affecting all the residents who live in there by this constant stream of traffic. And as a cyclist, I'm normally pro-cycling, but in this case, I'm completely pro-tree, and they are gorgeous and beautiful, whereas the north side of Pike isn't. And I think it just wouldn't be safe. And I have not once seen a single cyclist using the current bike lanes on Pike. So I would ask that you please go back to the drawing board for a better solution. And I see I have a little more time. I also want to say, because I never get a response, I've complained about the crosswalk at Pratt and Sunset, and we've almost been killed several times. And no one will call me back. So I don't know if you have anything to say.
No, thank you very much for your time.
If you actually communicated with somebody and we haven't communicated back, if you give your name to that guy right there,
Okay.
someone will get back with you.
Okay.
Okay.
And I've talked to Longmont police officers about the issue on Pike, and they say it's a traffic engineering problem. And I don't know, have I grown? Do I look taller?
You are 8 feet tall. 8 feet tall. Thank you. All right. No relation. And let's hold our applause for Hal Bagley. And Hal lets me down. All right. Former council member Karen Banker.
Thank you all. Karen Benker, 1919 Andrew Alden Street. First of all, I very much want to thank you, Mayor Bagley, for spending a generous amount of your time today meeting with 8 of us from different communities. I know you're busy, and you took the time, and it's very much appreciated. One of the things I wanted to point out is we have never had an issue in South Longmont that has pulled together our 5 neighborhoods as this one. You now have Prospect, Creekside, Rainbow Ridge, Southmore Park, and Watersong all talking to one another, and we're on the same page. So thank you. I think you know what the major concerns are. I'm not going to go into any detail. 1, please do not remove the 58 mature trees. We think we've got some other options. 2, we need to slow traffic both on 287 and on Pike Road. If you want to reduce traffic accidents, that's the way you do it. And we're asking for a smaller concrete footprint on Pike. We understand that we need to have more cars flow. It's growing, but the way you design it is extremely important. I believe my neighbors have been respectful, courteous, but we are very dedicated to this issue. I will also mention, as you probably noticed tonight, we have brought a lot of new folks that have not been familiar with City Council and how it works, and they have become interested in this, and they are watching very closely. In fact, I think most of them now all know your names. So some of that may be welcomed by some of you, and some of it may not. But we ask all of you if we could work together on this issue. We want to work with the city. We want to think out of the box. We don't want to always use the AASHTO guidelines. They were drafted in the 1950s. And thanks to social media, and hopefully the Times call, whatever plan comes out of council tonight, we will definitely be spreading across our 5 neighborhoods, so they will know what's going on, and they'll be keeping very close attention to this particular issue. I'm asking you tonight to pass a resolution that will unite us. We want to work together, and at this point, we feel that some council members are listening to us, and perhaps some are not. We feel that we can find some resolution to these problems together. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Charles Bailey.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and council members. My name is Charles Bailey. I live at 1809 Christie Court in Prospect. I too want to thank you, Mayor, for meeting with us today, and Marcia for last week for spending some time to talk to us about, oh, sorry.
Scream into that mic.
Okay.
Get right up into it.
Yes, sir. I think you've heard repeatedly that folks in Prospect love their trees. I serve on the Prospect HOA board, and I want you to understand that we currently maintain over 800 trees in Prospect, including the ones along Pike. Last year, we spent over $100,000 replacing trees, dealing with those trees. So trees are very important, but that's really just one issue. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the comments you've heard. I know I'm toward the end of the list, and I'm going to repeat some of the comments that you've heard from others who oppose this project as it's currently proposed. I guess the point I'd like to emphasize is that we really don't have answers to a lot of the questions we posed. When we met with Councilmember Martin last week, we posed a number of questions to her. How wide are the bike lanes going to be? If we do some tree mitigation, are any of those trees going to be planted along Pike Road? If the speed limit is reduced, how does that affect the dynamics? And we just got this afternoon from Marcia some answers from city staff. My impression from all this, and I've been here 3 weeks in a row, is that there are questions probably you have, I know we have as homeowners about this project. And so I would, I guess, support the recommendations several people have made. Let's slow this down a little bit. Let's study it some more. Let's give some more opportunity for community input. And let's get some of these questions answered before we move forward. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Strider Benston.
Thanks, sir. Mayor, Council, Strider Benston, 951 17th Avenue. This reminds me of a black preacher I knew in Greenwood, Mississippi about 60 years ago. We've heard the voice of democracy calling. So let's keep our ears open. And I believe in bicycles, doggies, trees, and oxygen. So we do have a climate crisis on the planet, and let's be aware of all this. And the only way we can deal with it is democratically. We have a federal government which at the moment is set out to destroy democracy everywhere. We got a president who worships Duterte in the Philippines, who kills thousands. The government in Colombia just put out an order to all of their their generals and stuff to kill 2 to 4 times more people than they have been killing lately. We're trying to start a war in Venezuela or Iran or Puerto Rico or wherever. The threat to overthrow the United States Constitution and the basic rule of law is absolutely on the cutting edge right now. Federal judge in Washington, D.C., yesterday said this court is not prepared to roll back the tide of history. Let's remember that we live in a democratic republic, and let's try to get it back to where we have input instead of a corrupt dictatorship taking over everything. And I'm totally serious on this. Let me read you just from the last paragraph of the Mueller report. The evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues. If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. based on the facts and the applicable legal standard, we are unable to reach that judgment. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, that concludes first call, public invited to be heard. The meeting is adjourned. No, just kidding. We're going to take a break. So let's come back in, I'll say 5, which means we'll probably come back in 7. So. All right, that's about 8 minutes. Let's go ahead and get back to our seats and dive on in. I have. All right, let's move on to last week. We tabled Resolution 2019-48, which is 10A on our consent agenda this evening. It was removed. Our Resolution 2019-48 is a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Colorado Department of Transportation for grant funding for Pike Road improvements. And again, this was carried over from the May 14th, 2019 regular session. I believe staff has already presented, and so you have not? I don't remember. You have anything else?
We presented, we do not need to
Yeah,
present.
okay, that's what I thought. All right, so Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I want to remind everyone that the 58 trees, if they were removed from their position in the right-of-way on the south side, would in fact be replanted elsewhere, and many people, I don't know whether it's geographically feasible because of all of the problems with the terrain on the north side, but I would certainly be in favor of replacing those trees on the north side where, as several people pointed out, there is no beautification and no sound barrier. I think that'd be a great idea if it's possible. Given that, I really want to say that with public safety always at the top of my mind, I think it would be a tremendously bad idea to allow Pike Road to go unpaved for another winter. And therefore, I move passage of this measure as written. Thank you.
All right, it's been, okay, hold on, no booze, no nothing. We got a lot of conversation going on, and we don't want to start that, whoever did that. Let's go ahead. There's a motion and a second, and it is now time to debate. So, or ask questions, etc. So, Mayor Pro Tem?
What I would like to see is a meeting with CDOT before this goes any further forward. We've heard from various people what they say that CDOT says, but we haven't actually heard from CDOT. And since this whole thing is initiated by CDOT and completely dependent upon the fact that CDOT wants to have a double lane turn off of Main, diverting more traffic onto Pike, and then trying to figure out ways to slow that traffic down while still keeping it at 40 miles an hour, and then adding a couple of bike lanes, and then I would like to have a discussion with CDOT before we move forward on this. There are so many different things, and I do think it's wonderful that the neighborhoods of Southmore and Ridgeview and Watersong and Creekside and Prospect are talking to each other because they are connected and they do have common interests. So that would be my preference before we move this forward, is that we actually have a discussion with a representative of CDOT.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have a few questions of the Transportation Department. So, Mr. Engstead? Thank you. You remember last week I asked for some cost analysis of putting an off-street bike lane through the trees. I guess it would be on the, is it the south side? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you come up with a cost analysis for me? And does that include removing any trees or not? I'll just let you explain.
We ran some high-level numbers.
Okay.
Assuming that we would remove bike lanes from the area around Prospect on both sides of the road, supplement that with a concrete trail on the south side. Removing bike lanes would run about, for materials, would about $167,000. The detached concrete bike track would be about $177,000, a difference of about $10,000. What was also conditioned in this estimate was that the construction of a kind of a trail through those trees would be challenging in terms of how you get your construction equipment in there to actually build it. So that that estimate is subject to change, knowing that you're going to be running front-end loaders, concrete trucks through that area. The other challenge in looking at it is there will be some removal of trees.
Okay. And why is that?
Well, there are some that it isn't a straight path through all of those trees. It changes a little bit, and then at one end there's several larger pine trees that are actually would be in the way. In addition, as we looked at it, construction of it, we couldn't guarantee it wouldn't damage the root systems. What I've been advised is that normally when we do work like this, we ask that the contractor stays out of away from the drip line of the trees. That usually is evidence of where the root system is, and this would be going like right through the drip lines of all those trees.
So in order to make it, so what I'm hearing you say is that even if you did build the bike path so that it was 2 lanes, so that we wouldn't have to have anything on the north side, it would have to be a 2-lane bike path?
Yes, ma'am. There wouldn't be adequate space to fit it due to the topography on the north side.
Correct. And what would be the width of that bike path then?
I would assume it would be, I think we estimated about 8 feet, but I would recommend 10 feet.
So in order to make a good bike path, we would probably have to take down trees in order to do that, to get the construction equipment in there, to save us from damaging the root system and having to take the trees down later, because they would die. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think you'll lose some trees.
Some trees.
How many without a design, I don't know, and I can't guarantee that the rest of the construction would not damage any of the root systems.
Would this bike path go the full length of Pike Road?
Not the full length of Pike Road, only in the Prospect area. There's not adequate right-of-way to the west to build it. And then you also have to cross Left-Hand Creek, and we have an underpass, so there's just no space there.
So the rest of it would have to be on-road?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that really doesn't solve our problem. If we did that, is this all in the right-of-way of the city's right-of-way? Or is it on Prospect property?
It's all in city or CDOT right-of-way.
And if we did this, would it keep us from having to remove the trees for the turn lanes? Or is this a different issue? Because we're not really removing the trees specifically for the bike lane, are we? For the left-hand turns?
I think, well, a portion of it, when you look at the design as a whole, there are, without redesign, we couldn't adequately say what we would be able to save. Part of the challenge is the proximity of the trees behind the curb line is also a challenge that as a designer and engineer's concern, we have a great deal of concern about.
Okay. I have another question. Thank you for that. According to Charles, and I forgot your last name already, he had said he had just, through a friend, third-party information, had information from CDOT that they don't need this done for 2 or 3 years. Is that your information that you received from CDOT?
Mayor Bagley, council members, no, it is not. Our information from CDOT is that they are looking to do this improvement work next year, and our plan is for kind of be a seamless transition to undertake in conjunction with the IGA approval that widening this year towards the tail end of the year, and the approval of the IGA our improvements are basically contingent upon that approval of the IGA, because we can't put the job out to bid until we're guaranteed or we can show all of our funding.
Okay. One thing that I do want to say to the public is that CDOT is going to do this anyway. This is their plan. At the TAB meeting last week, we got an update on CDOT in general. They monitor all of their state highway intersections, looking for and getting data on crash sites to make them safe. This intersection has come closer to the top of their intersections that they need to look at and modify because of crashes. When we say crashes, we don't mean fatal crashes or high injury crashes. They could be fender benders, but they are considered crashes. I don't know that anybody on this council has the ability or the technical review capabilities to question CDOT's crash monitoring sites that they've been doing for 20 or 30 years. So if we don't accept this grant, they will put out an RFP and get somebody else to do it, because that is what they need to do to modify this intersection for their crashes. So it isn't, from my perspective, that the city of Longmont is saying, we want this, so we're going to do it now. We were brought into this because of CDOT. Initially, we were just going to pave that road. So as long as we're doing it, as long as we have to do it, I think that we need to look at our Envision Longmont plan and what we want for our city, which is multimodal. I do have another question, though, about the speed limit. It is at 40 miles per hour, which the other arterial roads are not at, from what I've driven and seen. Is there any reason why we cannot lower that to 35 miles an hour?
Mayor Bagley, City Council members, that presents a bit of a challenge.
Why?
Well, we undertook an engineering study looking at the speed limit on the road. And the AD basically, part of that kind of study takes into account number of access points, kind of topography of the road, as well as what's called the 85th percentile. And that is a measure of what most of the drivers are comfortably driving at. And that came up as about 43 miles per hour. So 85% of the cars driving it feel comfortable driving at 43 miles per hour, slightly over the 40, and that falls in line with the speed limit is correctly set at 40 miles per hour. The challenge would be if we change the speed limit down to 35 miles per hour, the proposed signal at Kaufman and Pike would no longer meet warrants. The formula for signal warrants takes into account the speed limits. We programmed it into our warrant analysis at 43 miles per hour, and it did meet the warrants. If you lower it to 35, it will not.
Where are you getting this information for the warrants from?
I may have to have Tyler Stamey come up and give me that, but I believe it's in accordance with the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is MUTCD, which is the adopted standard that most communities use for that type of analysis.
Tyler gave you the head nod.
So that was correct. My other question is, if we accept this grant and do the IGA, is there a time limit that we have to start construction on this? By accepting the grant, do we say that we have to start construction this summer? Listening to the people about construction all around, can we put the construction of it off after we've already accepted the grant?
I would have to confer and get back to you on that with CDOT, but I believe our schedule was to have it underway this year so that when CDOT came in with their work.
When are they coming in?
I believe early next year or the middle part of next year.
Is there any way that you can work with them to put their work off?
At this juncture, I don't have an answer for you.
That's what I would like to have an answer for that. How long can we put this off so that we are not circling these neighborhoods with construction all around them? I think that's a simple ask. Right? It's only CDOT.
It's not like it's the railroad.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot like BNSF. And just to get a plug in, I would like all of these cars off the road and put them all on a train. So, and we're working on that one. So, what I'm hearing is putting the cyclists on an off-road path would probably ruin as many or more trees than what we are considering taking out of the right-of-way. Am I correct in saying that or not?
Mayor Bagley, council members, what I indicated was I can't guarantee that the trees will survive.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. Jim, we heard concerns, and I had questions last week about counts of cyclists. We heard questions tonight about counts in terms of numbers of cars going through intersections, making left turns. When did we count? How confident are we in our numbers? And how do those numbers drive this plan?
Mayor Bagley, City Council members, I'm going to ask Tyler Stamey to come up and speak about the counts. I know we undertook as part of, prior to our public meetings, we undertook a number of counts along the roadway, and I know after the public meetings, we followed up with several others. He's got more data on those particular items than I would be able to provide.
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Waters, Tyler Stamey, City of Longmont, Transportation Engineering Administrator. So Councilmember Waters, we had done data, several rounds of data collection prior to this project. We had some numbers from 2017 initially that we talked about at our first public forum that was questioned. We did two subsequent rounds of data collection in February and March of 2019. So we have very, very current data for all the sections of Pike Road, all of the intersections from Main and Pike to Ridgeview and Pike, along with each section of Pike from Sunset to Main.
So talk about how those numbers are driving what the design is and the scheduling for the work that's proposed. I mean, it's one thing to collect the data. So what have we concluded based on the data?
So as far as the design goes, one of the things, the northbound left turn at Pike and Main, we're seeing about a little more than 400 northbound left turns in the AM peak hour. Kind of the traffic engineering rule of thumb ballpark is capacity is about 300 in an hour per single lane. So obviously capacity is higher than that because we've got 400 going through in an hour. Sorry,
They're having a hard time hearing you. But if you were turned around, they would admire your color combination. A gray suit with lavender shirt. I'm really impressed.
Thank you. So the turning movements at Main and Pike are one of the things to talk about. So that northbound left turn in the AM peak, we've got a little over 400 left turns in that AM peak hour. Rule of thumb, traffic engineering analysis is about 300 an hour is capacity of a single left turn lane when you start to say, we really need a second left turn lane here.
What are the risks if we don't address that? What's the so what? Gee, you've got 400 versus 300. If you don't address this, what would you anticipate? Or what do other data suggest?
Sure. So part of that is we're seeing longer queues for that northbound left, and I think we're also hearing that it's harder for eastbound left turns from Pike onto Main Street. And so there's only so much time each cycle at the signal, and that's all got to be spread between each of the movements.
So it's primarily an efficiency issue as opposed to a safety issue.
Safety comes into play as well. So prior to some changes that city staff had made, we had that northbound left turn operating in what we call protected permissive operation, which means you would get a green arrow followed by a yellow flashing arrow, at which time you could turn if there was an adequate gap. We saw a pretty high percentage of northbound left turners getting hit by southbound throughs that were resulting in injury crashes.
Be specific, which intersection and which direction?
Sorry, I'm speaking Pike and Main majorly right now.
And those are people headed north on Pike or north on Main, turning west on Pike.
Correct.
Just, am I accurate? And I think this number came out last week. That in the last 5 years, 83 reported accidents, 37 of which had had injuries, serious injuries associated with the accidents. Is that an accurate number?
So I don't have the number in front of me, but that's what I recall as well. 83 was the total in the period we presented you. We may have it here. But yes, it was 83 total, I believe, in the time period we presented you, and a high percentage of those were injury crashes.
So there is a combination of efficiency and safety concerns.
And so we made the change then to run protected only for majority of the day. So now it's a green.
Just the
you can
green
only,
line.
Only turn left on
Nothing
the green
permissible.
arrow. And so the trade-off is now potentially some longer queues that we're seeing, and people are starting to take more risks, it appears, in some of the recent crash data.
Let me go ahead, Jim. Were you going to add to that? Will you
Yeah,
indulge me, Mayor Bagley? I have just kind of keep running with these.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Councilman Waters, Mayor Bagley, City Council members. On that accident data, we had, Tyler had provided me data before. It was 83 reported crashes over a 5-year period. 29 of those crashes were for northbound left turning movements. So a significant percentage of that was for that.
All right. I'm going to shift just a bit. We've heard a number of questions about the north side. Why can't we do more on the north side? Now, you made reference last week, Jim, to infrastructure concerns. Whatever subterranean drainage systems or culverts or whatever, what we can and can't do on the north side. Could you talk more about that?
So immediately west of 287 on the north side of Pike Road is a rather large vault which is used for one of our water lines. You can see it from the road. It sticks a little bit above ground. I believe there's a 24-inch water line that runs out of there and along the north side of Pike Road. Further to pretty much to the west of Kaufman, the road kind of pretty much drops off. There's a rather large ravine, and as you go further west, and that's why we cannot build anything kind of off the road in that area. And in fact, part of the requirement, or one of the safety improvements on the project, will be the installation of a guardrail in that area. So those are some of the challenges. We were able to put a sidewalk in, but at that area and with the kind of the alignment of the road, because if you look at a kind of a map, the road kind of shifts a little bit. Pushing it to the further north really doesn't, it's not going to be conducive to a safe roadway.
So safety is a concern. Because even if you tried to move it north, because of how it's going to have to jog or
it's going to jog up, and then it's not going to align with 287.
I want to shift. Can I shift just a bit to the? I think probably Phil, this is for you, but we had a task force that put together a set of recommendations for our multimodal transportation plan. I'm looking at you, Phil. We reviewed a plan that you presented that was our, I can't remember the acronym, for our multimodal plan. In it, there was a set of standards, correct? For street upgrades or development. For public transportation, motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists. Am I remembering this correctly?
Mayor and Councilmember Waters, Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager. Not sure where we're going with the idea of the standards being set, but we did just recently work on an enhanced multi-use corridor plan.
The enhanced multi-use, that's the plan, yes.
That's the way we do it. We have lots of acronyms, and we call that the EMUC.
The EMUC. Yeah. It was EMUC was the acronym. Yes, thank you.
And then before that's the multimodal transportation plan. We first did that in 2005. That was part of that planning effort, and I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
The EMUC. Which of those two plans codified or organized standards that we should apply to street improvements?
Mayor and Councilmember Waters, that's actually in our design standards plan that I think you were just requesting some more time being spent on that and moving that forward. That's where the actual roadway widths and the bicycle lane widths and the buffer widths
the plan
are
I'm
in.
after, yeah.
So what we do as planners is we try to tell you where, or talk about where these facilities go, but the engineers put together.
Where did those standards come from? In terms of lane widths and buffered bike lanes and all the components of those standards.
Mayor and Councilmember Waters, I'll take a quick crack, yeah, and we'll hand it over to Jim. Really what we do is we look at the national standards when we look at a lot of those lane widths, and we start with those. So typically it's a 12-foot travel lane was the older way of looking at this, and and the 5-foot lane for bicycle lane is typically what we were looking at with those older standards. But I'll turn it over to Jim.
Why should we care about those standards?
Those are national standards, so we look at.
Their national standards is not compelling.
Well, those standards are based on basically what. I mean, it's to say it's nationwide, but we also look at it. CDOT looks at those standards as far as what they do on their roads. Most all municipalities look at those as well, but we try to revise them when we can as far as, is there a standard that we can work with? And there's ranges with those standards as well, so we can talk.
Well, here's what I'm really curious about: whether or not motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists are more or less safe if those standards are applied or not. That's where I'm going with my question.
Mayor Bagley, City Council members, Councilman Waters, the importance of standards, and in particular our design standards, are that we require kind of uniformity everywhere. They are based on kind of, as Phil indicated, national standards, but so and our city staff follows them. So in this case, when we look at an arterial roadway, those standards, the same thing we would ask a developer when he built something, would require a bike lane. A certain width of roadway, we set cross sections for arterials, collectors, and local city streets. They are kind of our Bible for how we kind of look at roadways, and this is one particular aspect of them. We also look at horizontal and vertical designs of roadways. We look at how we, the cover over water lines. There's a host of them. In fact, it's about 3 inches thick. We are in the process of revising them and bringing them forward and updating them. They were last updated in 2007.
I think the question is safety a consideration on the
I just want
design
to
of
know,
the national standards?
Are residents of Longmont any safer because of those standards or not?
The answer is yes.
Yes. I mean, when you develop national standards, just like we do the fire code and those types of issues, safety is a component in the development of those standards. Is that correct, Jim?
That is correct.
So if we don't apply the standards, are residents, motorists, and pedestrians in Longmont using Pike Road less safe?
I would say yes.
Based on not our experience, but based on some set of experiences across the country that drove the creation of the standards?
Yes.
Right, when it's this width, you have these kinds of consequences. I'm just trying to get at, I heard last week, I heard Phil answer a question, how important are the bike lanes? He said 10 out of 10. I asked on a scale of 1 to 10. And I think I heard you made reference to our standards. So what I've cogitated on in the last week is if we have a set of standards, I've seen a lot of standards that are national standards that I would look at and go, they're not high enough, or they're not good enough, or not relevant enough in other areas. I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, but in other areas, just the fact that its standard isn't standard is not compelling. Whether or not there's evidence that people are safer because of the standard being applied, that matters, right? So if we went through a process to adopt a set or develop or refine a set of standards based on health and safety of residents, and we failed to apply them to this or any project, it would seem to be a failure on our part to meet our own standard for health and safety of residents. And if we owe it to cyclists, just like we do to motorists, to meet those standards, then this design and every design ought to reflect whatever the widths are for bikes, for pedestrians, for autos, et cetera. That's where I was trying to get my head wrapped around in terms of what drives the components of this plan. Why do you believe, Jim, that motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists will be safer with the design you're proposing than without it, or some other design?
Part, if I focus on bike lanes, we're providing a facility that is for that use. We've added a safety measure because we're providing that little bit of buffering.
We're not looking for a physical impediment between the bikes and the vehicles. We've revised some components which still meet our standards to lower the widths of the road. Studies have shown that when you constrict a road, lower the lane widths, you can slow cars down. I think the plan we've provided providing for all users of the road, which would be bikes, pedestrians, and vehicles, is the best and safest plan we can lay out.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so just moving forward, so Robert's rules are in effect. I didn't want to cut you off, Dr. Waters. You were just over 10 minutes, but I'm going to start timing everybody so that you get 10 minutes, okay? So let's go ahead with Councilmember Finley.
I won't need my 10.
Thanks, Councilmember.
I actually got in an accident at Pike and 287, and it's one of the reasons I decided to retire, is that intersection. It's very dangerous, and I think we would do a disservice to our community not to fix it. There's a reason CDOT wants us to fix it. It's dangerous, and that's what we need to do. That's why I'll be supporting this.
Well, hold, that was short. Hold on. Thank you, Councilmember. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Sorry. So at the corner, we've talked about this before, but I didn't really get a question. Okay, I'm sorry. At the corner of Pike and 287, if you are headed east on Pike, there are 4 lanes. 3 of them are turn lanes. One of them is left, one of them goes straight ahead, and one of them is to the right. When I took a safety class a few years ago at the police, they talked about how dangerous a lot of a lot of Main Street is. And it's, I think, largely because it is very, very many lanes. People really underestimate how fast other cars are going. And we do nothing to slow them down enough before they come into Plateau and Pike. So people think that they can make it across those lanes on a left turn, and they can't. They can't because they've underestimated how fast the cars are going. So what percentage of the accidents at that intersection are from people turning left onto Main Street from Pike? Was that the 23 that you said?
Mayor Bagley?
You said 23 was the northbound turning out of the 83 accidents?
Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, the numbers we were looking at was 83 accidents for the intersection.
Right.
On the northbound left turns, we saw about 29, and that was over a 5-year period.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Let's see. That's helpful. So how wide would the buffered bike lane be? Would that be 5 feet wide too?
What we look at with the bike lane is the standard bike lane width is 5 feet.
Yes.
The buffering would be like a 2-foot area of striping. An example would be, most recently we did it on Pace, north of 17th Street. They're a little bit wider, but we were able to put on the west side, we have about 2-foot buffered bike lanes up there.
But it's just paint striping?
It's just paint striping.
Okay. That would alert people. I've kind of been persuaded that, I'm wondering why our map only shows the improvements from Main Street to Sunset and not from all the way down to Hover. This is all the way to Hover, isn't it?
The Mayor Pro Tem Christensen,
This
Mayor Bagley,
project.
the limits of this project are from Main Street to Sunset.
Oh.
The section from Sunset to Hover, I believe, has been widened out already. That is one of the areas of our bike trial project, which was, I think, brought up earlier. We have we were trying some kind of sort of a experiment with different types of bike buffering. And we'll probably be coming back at some point to speak about the results. We've been getting surveys from residents on what their reactions, the comfort levels of riding and that, but that should be coming to an end this year.
Yeah. Well, I myself, having bicycled 5,500 miles through Europe, and when I was young, I used to bicycle twice a day, 10 miles each to get to work and back. So I have a lot of experience with biking, but it's my experience that bike lanes on the road are much more dangerous for bicyclists. However, I've been persuaded that in this case, it wouldn't work to try to, all of what you try to do is be consistent, because if a bicyclist or a car has to keep changing around and making different routes, it doesn't work. So it seems to me we have to work with what we've got. And from Hover to Main Street, we don't really have a good, consistent way to put a safe and efficient bike lane off the side of the road, in my mind. And I was partly persuaded by this, by Bob Allen and quite a few other people. So we really do have to work with what we've got. And so I think it's fine to have the bike lanes. I look at that intersection, though, at Pike and 23rd. Even if they had 2 lanes come in, why could we not just, we have 4 lanes there. Why could we not just restripe it and devote 2 lanes to coming off of Main Street, as CDOT insists upon doing, and then the other turns going left and right? One could be a left turn lane and one could be a straight ahead or right turn lane. That way we wouldn't need to widen it up there. That just seems like a simple and an inexpensive and still a safe solution.
Mayor Bagley, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, City Council members, we heard what you said last week, and we took an opportunity to model that area.
Yeah.
With exactly what you had said, and looking at whether we could make it, maintain the existing width of the roadway and shift the lanes around. The challenge with that is that while there is a large volume on Main Street turning left, there's also significant traffic in the eastbound direction. In the AM peak, there's over 200 cars making a left. In the PM peak, there's over 500 making a right. So when we model it, it's going to start backing up those lanes because of the timing issues. So we would not recommend that.
Yeah, okay. I see the problem. And I do understand why you can't put why you can't widen it to the north, because of that infrastructure under there, which would be impossible to, it seems to me, to move, or incredibly costly. Okay. So I also worry about, I'm glad that you're going to put in a traffic signal at Kaufman and Prospect. That will help enormously to connect those neighborhoods in a much more efficient way and a much safer way. Right now, it's just impossible to get out of there. But I worry about Ridgeview. There's one little way to get out of there, and there's no light there. We've heard people complain about that. What is the future plan for Ridgeview and getting in and out of there? We can't put a light there?
Mayor Bagley, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, City Council members. The challenge is very similar to Kaufman, is it currently does not meet warrants. The neighborhood, while it is rather large, is not large enough doesn't push enough traffic in that area to warrant a traffic signal.
Well, I don't know. It seems very strange to me. Okay. I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Most of my questions have actually been posed and answered by the majority of my colleagues here on council. I do think I remember reading somewhere in a document, though, that the majority of our car-on-bicycle crashes here in the city of Longmont are the result of turning maneuvers. Is that accurate?
Once again, I'll ask Tyler to step up and.
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, I don't have that stat readily available, but the majority of our bike crashes do happen at intersections, whether they're related to turns or not. Anecdotally, most of them are, but to say that 100%, I'm not prepared to answer that right now.
Okay, thank you. And so I know that in my communications with a good majority of our commuter bicyclist community, that they prefer the buffered bike lanes on street because it provides extra visibility, especially when it comes to turning maneuvers, as opposed to being separated off on a detached path coming through an intersection. It makes a harder visibility line. That's my understanding of what they say about on street buffered bike lanes. Would that sound like a fair characterization?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, yes, when you think about your sight lines when you're approaching an intersection as a driver, and if you've got bicyclists on a sidewalk versus in the street, just where you're looking, you're more likely to see someone that's kind of further out and in the lane. And as far as what we've heard from a lot of the bicycling community is that when the bicyclist is in the lane, they're a vehicle, and they have the right of way as well. And so that side street vehicle that's entering the street has to yield to that bicyclist as well. So there's kind of two benefits there from that treatment.
All right, very good. Thank you. So I guess where I'm sitting right now is I am a supporter of anytime we have the opportunity to make improvements and add on-street buffered bike lanes to our streets, that we do that going forward as an equity issue as well. So I am a proponent and supporter of the on-street buffered bike lanes in this project. I think that there's a lot of challenges that are faced when talking about trying to change the scope and how we go at this project. So I'm not sure how much more progress can be made, but it's obvious that there's palpable heartburn amongst the many residents that reside around Pike Road. And just from last week to this week, with the efforts made between some various council members, the mayor, with meeting with residents, I've heard a change in tone. Last week I heard more of just vote it down, where this week I heard more of we want more information, we want more conversation, we want more education and dialogue on the subject. And albeit I don't think there's going to be many more changes that can be made feasibly, I still respect the will of the residents enough to say that I feel that there does, and I do understand that I believe there's still enough time to allow for more communication and more data to be provided to our residents to show where we're going. So I would not be supporting this motion as made to allow for a little bit more dialogue to happen between our concerned residents to get this project to move forward in a way that is at least we all can stomach where we're heading in that direction. And so that's where I'm sitting right now.
All right, Councilmember Peck.
Thank you. Actually, that was why I asked if we accept this vote to accept this IGA tonight to get the money. What is the time that we have to actually construct this road? And it was just to go to Councilman Rodriguez's point, is that we can get more information, more dialogue going, more education if we don't have to construct it this summer. And you said you didn't know what the time length would be for us. And that's why I said I would really like to know what that would be.
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Peck, we would have to see what CDOT has in their schedule. We know that they were not going to start the work till next year, and our anticipated schedule was to try and have our work completed around the time that they were willing to or going to start. So we were looking to have this project underway this year. Originally, we're looking at this summer to get started. Originally, this was programmed into our paving rehab program last year. And as the project developed, it kind of grew, and then we programmed it in this year as a larger project. So the road is in need of some care, and I think if we let it go another winter, we'll be looking at added costs. It may take more to actually redo the improvements than what we currently have scheduled.
I would still like that information. And I do want to say that I'm a little bit disappointed in staff in that the questions that should have been be answered obviously you struggled with. For example, the speed limits on the roads, this question now of what type of accidents with bikes do we have? Are they at intersections? Are they right turns? Are they that information isn't broken down, because I think that data going forward is really important as we construct and manage and design roads. We need to know where the accidents happen, why they happen, et cetera. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I was a little disappointed that we weren't kind of on top of our game in answering some of those questions. I understand why we have to have the on-road bike lanes, because of not being able to put a complete bike path down all of Pike Road from Main Street to 95th. If it's not going to be a continuous bike path, then putting it off-road is dangerous. So I totally support putting on-road buffered bike paths. But I'm a little, I support this plan in theory, but I would like to know how far we can push out this construction date. So I don't think that I'm going to vote for it tonight just because of that.
All right, Dr. Waters?
Thanks. I'll try to use less than my 10 minutes.
And I'm not sure if you've had, everybody gets two.
This
will
is
be your
my second.
Right, you're good. You're good.
The question, I guess, for Councilmember Rodriguez and Councilmember Peck is it delaying construction because of changes in the plan that you're anticipating? So it's just a matter of because of the other construction that's going to go around. All right. Well, I think need to go on record. We're all going on record now of where we stand on these. Listen, I am sympathetic to the concerns of residents of Prospect and all the neighborhoods in the south part of Longmont. And I respect the engagement and how passionate they are about the environment and quality of life and all of the issues that we've heard about. And I have heard tonight that we're paying attention, and I would expect for people to pay attention and be held accountable for my vote on this and every other issue. I've also heard multiple times that I hope you're listening. And I think I could argue the case with as much detail as anybody who's opposed to this plan. I probably couldn't do it with as much conviction, because I'm going to vote on behalf, I'm going to support the motion. Because I think in the interest of my job, I believe, is to do what I can to see that we use public funds to serve, to produce the highest level of safety for the largest number of residents in the most efficient possible way. So if delaying is simply to draw out the time frame or to work around, other construction issues, I understand that. But it sounds to me like that potentially has costs associated with it. And in the interest of pedestrians, motorists, and bicyclists, I think we need to move forward. I've listened. I just don't agree with everything that I've heard in terms of the opponents to this. And I'll stand and be held accountable for that vote by whomever wants to hold me accountable. But I think we ought to move forward with it, and I'm gonna support the motion.
All right, there's nobody else in the queue. I'm going to set my timer here to make sure that I also adhere to the rules. Hold on and go. All right. So I had the opportunity to meet with Karen Banker, Dave Bartel, Charles Gravel, Melanie Burgess, Sarah Napier, Charles Bailey, Linda Pryor, and Brooke Turpening this just today, this afternoon. I just have, in speaking with them, I have some questions, right? So first of all, the one question that I'd like to know is, what's the plan on Pike Road in the future from Main Street east, Pike going east, and then Hover going west, or Pike crossing Hover going west? Is this it? Or are there going to be some type of bypass going off to Weld County or over to 119?
Mayor Bagley, City Council members, the current 2014 roadway plan does not show Pike Road going any further west.
Okay.
Pretty much ends at Hover.
Ends at Hover.
To the east, we show a future four-lane arterial extending to, I believe, to 119th Street. That's on a plan. I believe it's also in our multimodal plan and Envision Longmont as well.
So theoretically, people would not be able to turn left on Pike and then get to 119 without hitting Hover, turning right, and turning left. I mean, you're like, yeah, whatever.
Mayor Bagley,
Yeah.
I lost you there. Could you run that by me again?
So there's not going to be some type of expressway along Pike hitting Hover and then continuing up and over, or we're not going to build anything that goes into 119 and just connects in, right?
The current plans we have do not show it as an expressway, only as an arterial.
All right. And then there was some, how wide are the driving lanes? 12 or 11 feet?
I believe we've reduced them to 11 feet,
All
which
right.
still meets the standard for an arterial.
Okay, so that still meets national standards.
Yes, it does.
All right. So one of the things in meeting with the residents, everybody, there were a lot of different opinions, and I pointed out it's a lot like the Mayor's and Commissioners Committee, where everybody comes together and we want different things, but, heck, we're just going to all come together and band and get all of it done together. But they shared some common concerns, and I got the impression that one of their concerns is they wanted to minimize the impact. So it sounds like there's not going to be any eminent domain, right? We're not taking from private citizens.
Mayor Bagley, City Council members, as part of this project, we are not looking for the acquisition of any right-of-way.
All right. So even then, right, it's our legal right to use as much of our city property as we want. However, are we minimizing the pavement? Are we maximizing traffic mitigation and safety concerns while minimizing the actual footprint of the asphalt going down Pike? Could it be smaller and still meet national standards and comply with our concerns for safety?
Mayor Bagley, City Council members, as I indicated earlier, I think we've laid out the best plan for safety. While the buffered bike lanes don't necessarily meet city standards, our newer standards that we're going to be bringing forward, that will be included.
Okay.
So we're looking, part of that safety factor was to provide that additional bike lane buffer.
Okay. All right. And then the other question I have is, again, these are questions, I wrote these questions before, but a lot of the information came out. But just to confirm, if it's currently 40 miles an hour, and it's planned to stay at 40 miles an hour, and if we move to 35 miles an hour, the traffic warrants state that the math indicates that we would lose the light signal on Kaufman and Pike, right? Is that what you said?
Mayor Bagley, that is correct.
Okay, all right. So if we did reduce it to 35, we just would lose the light.
Mayor Bagley, that's correct.
Is there anything we can do, right? So, I mean, a lot of the concern on this the two lanes, so it is compelling, right? So when I was in Washington, D.C., we were talking about quiet zones. The federal reps of the Rail Association basically said, stop asking us to make your cities quiet. We don't care about noise. We care about safety. So we want a lot of noise because it keeps people safe. Ironically, quiet zones, as they're called, are also more safe. So if you make an argument saying we want to make our town more safe, well, you're going to get money. But if you say you want your town quiet, we're not giving you a dime, right? And that was it. That was the short and condensed 20-minute lesson that I got. So here, it's compelling. The 87 accidents, 37 injuries, 29 accidents turning, from northbound west onto Pike. But the residents are still concerned. I mean, I would be too. I'd fear that you've got 2 constant full-time lanes of traffic coming off the highway into this residential neighborhood. So my question is, explain why 2 left-hand turn lanes, right, would somehow calm the fears of traffic congestion. Is it going to be, I mean, what is it going to look like? As you look at the traffic modeling and they're turning east off northbound Main Street or 287, turning west on northbound or off northbound 287, and then it goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane, right? Or 4 lanes to 2 lanes. Is it going to get congested? How do we make sure that people aren't there's crashes and jockeying and I can't imagine it.
Mayor Bagley, City Council members, what we looked at is that the design of how we laid out basically what is a 800-foot merge lane as they make the turn is more than adequate for as drivers are coming forward to merge together to the single lane to the east of Kaufman. What I would ask and remember is that we're not adding more traffic. We're adding the same amount of traffic in a less amount of time. That's how you control it. So as I indicated last week, the timing of the signal may have 30 seconds of green time. We'll reduce that, okay, to push the same amount of cars through in a lesser amount of time. That's how we can add more time to the other movements so that we can start helping to resolve the eastbound Pike, provide more green time for that northbound left.
Has CDOT had the chance to weigh in on this? Have we worked with CDOT at all to talk about what we're doing? And if so, how much? What do they say, et cetera?
We've been coordinating with CDOT all along. I believe they've been looking at our plans as well, and it meets their requirements.
Okay. Is it possible if we remove the trees on the south to basically replace them on the north?
Mayor Bagley, I believe we have been discussing that. We would be looking to replace or transplant. I don't know that we can only transplant about 5 of them, but we would be mitigating, and that was one of the areas we would be looking at. Yes.
Are you talking about the planting of the new trees?
Yeah.
too?
So if we kill 58 trees or uproot 58 trees, is it possible to uproot them or replace them on the other side where there's room?
Mayor Bagley, the answer is yes.
And the replacement number is actually?
I believe in mitigating the size of the trees, we'd be planting over 80 trees.
80 trees. Okay. All right. I'm almost out of time, but last but not least, is there any way to convince CDOT to slow down the incremental signs coming into town? So as people are coming up to that if we do the 2 turn lanes, is it possible to do something so that we can go from 65, 55, 45 well before that left-hand turn lane?
Mayor Bagley, we've been contacting CDOT about this, and I don't believe they were willing to entertain changing the speed limit locations, but they were willing to entertain adding additional signing to note that the speed limit is being reduced as you come north.
Okay, all right. Yeah, this sucks. Okay, not the work you've done, but the decision sucks. I told the neighbors this afternoon, and it stinks because we're trying to route traffic, and we're also trying to make people happy, and sometimes you can't do both. So, all right, Mayor Pro Tem. 15 seconds left, by the way. Look at that.
Oh, you.
No, me, not you. Go ahead.
Okay. The couple, I believe the. Oh, okay. Anyway, they mentioned a problem at the corner, I believe, of South Pratt Parkway and Pike with the crosswalk. Can we re-examine that too?
Mayor Bagley, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, I took an opportunity to look at that intersection, and I'm not sure it's South Pratt Parkway. I think it may be
Okay.
Ken Pratt and Sunset. But we can certainly, we'll certainly take a look at it.
Okay.
I
think
actually
that's
have
right.
her information and phone number, and have sent that out so we can
Oh.
follow up on it.
Okay, thank you, because we do need some crosswalks so people can get across the road. It's crazy.
All right, Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I'd like to clear up a couple of things. First one is that I heard it said that the staff had perhaps not done their best work on this project, and respectfully, I disagree very strongly. Having been an engineer most of my life, it's hard. And just because you can't explain something to a group of laypersons with great facility doesn't mean that you haven't done the engineering right. And even if you are able to explain with great facility, you almost always don't have time. I can, for example, explain exactly how the 2 turn lanes and the coordinated stoplights at Kaufman and Main would push the same amount of traffic through much faster, provide more green time and more turn time at the Kaufman intersection. But I don't have time because I only have 10 minutes to talk, and I have a lot of other things to say. And I've been working on this for, 8, 9 months since September of 2018. As hard as I could, given the number of different balls that a council member has to stay in the air, has to keep in the air. And I know that our traffic planning staff has been working on this issue much harder than I have, and I trust and commend their work. So let's get that out of the way. You guys have really done everything that you could have, and I have no doubts that you have produced the safest design possible given the constraints that you face. So, okay. The rest of the time I'd like to talk about procrastination. 20-odd years ago when the Prospect subdivision was platted, at that time, Prospect Road had been designated as a 4-lane arterial as its, its future fate. It used to be a bypass. We keep hearing that word bandied about, but it had already been downgraded from that status into just a city arterial. It had that status before the annexation of the area that's now Prospect, and it was reevaluated subsequently, and it still kept that status. So I'm going to talk about procrastination. Because when Kiki Wallace could have allowed a wider buffer between Prospect and Pike in his original plat for Prospect neighborhood. He didn't do that. Instead, he put more area in lots and tried to second the city right-of-way to form part of the buffer that new urbanism no doubt designates and recommends be bigger than what it is in Prospect neighborhood. As a result of that, an extra row of trees were planted in city right-of-way. There was quite a bit of discussion with the city at that time, but since those little new trees weren't very dangerous, they stayed. In 2005 and 6, Ms. Musser and Ms. Banker, who both have spoken several times recently in this current discussion, sat on a multimodal advisory board which evaluated the citywide multimodal plan and continued and approved the designation of Pike Road as a city arterial which would receive on-street bike lanes as part of the comprehensive plan. In 2015 and 16, Envision Longmont public outreach, the people overwhelmingly said there should be on-street bike lanes throughout the city in a connected grid. And then, in September 2018, I received an email from former councilmember Banker expressing concerns about the longevity of Kiki's trees. At that time, I began working with the traffic planners to fully understand the engineering that informed this project. Between September 2018 and the public meetings in March 2019, I worked on this project pretty intensely, and nobody but me asked for the studies, design reworks, counts that are being called for now. I looked at the ones they had and found them adequate, and I questioned every single one of them, including whether a stoplight at Kaufman was warranted according to the city rules. All the issues raised were being investigated at that time and have been re-investigated since March. The light at Kaufman, which was not in the March plan, has been added to the plan, at additional cost to the plan. Traffic calming, which was requested by many, has been added in a couple different ways. The light at Kaufman has that effect. So does the narrowing of the lanes from 12 feet wide to 11 feet wide. Smart communicating lights will prevent congestion at the intersections. Separating recreational bike traffic, dog walkers, and children from commuter racers and exercisers is a main safety issue. The pro-bikers overwhelmingly support asphalt lanes because they don't want to be endangering children, dog walkers, and other pedestrians. I actually received a most extraordinary letter from one of the active opponents on this project. He said that saving the trees is not really because of the trees, but it's to delay the project in the hope that Pike never becomes a 4-lane road. And I want to tell everybody that that's a main objective of the traffic department, of the city. We all hope that we can make Longmont a multimodal city, and we hope that Pike never, ever becomes a 4-lane road for automobiles. The way to do that is to reduce automobile traffic everywhere. And we're working on that as hard as we can. So I won't support favoring one neighborhood that has a lot of time to advocate in its own interests over other neighborhoods who don't.
Hey, guys.
We need to do this now. There's no reason for any more discussion. It's all been done, and I believe the staff. So I'm going to vote to pass this as written now.
Councilmember Peck?
Thanks. The mayor gave me his 15 seconds. So I realized that the question that I asked for, as far as extending the timeline of construction, has nothing to do with this IGA. So I can get that information after we accept this IGA and vote for this, so I will be voting for it.
Nobody's left in the queue, and I did tell Councilmember Martin she could go last, but what I was going to say is, as I've heard it all, it would be really easy. I've counted the votes. It'd be really easy for me to vote no on this project. I'm not going to. I'm going to vote for it. I know that the neighbors are not happy with that. And for me, just so you know, what it comes down to is that number, two turns to the left, and mitigating that safety number. That's really what it comes down to for me. But at the same time, we need to make sure we put more trees on the north, make sure that we do whatever we can to minimize the footprint, and go from there. So it'd be easy to hide behind politics tonight, but I won't do it. All right, let's vote. All right, that passes 5-2 with Councilmember Rodriguez and Mayor Pro Tem against. So, all right, let's move on to the next issue. All right, let's move on to the City of 11A, City of Longmont Municipal Code regarding the operation of bicycles. We have no more than 5 minutes, please, city staff. And again, it's not that I'm being mean, it's just to get you guys home to your families. As soon as you look at me, I'm going to hit okay, go.
Mayor, members of council, Ben Ortiz, Planning and Development Services. So earlier this year, council directed staff to bring back a review of bicycle regulations. With that in mind, we'll be reviewing two issues. The first is the requirement that bicycles riding on sidewalks must dismount at crosswalks. And the second is the safety stop, where the stop is yield state legislation, which was passed by the state legislature in 2018, which allows communities to adopt safety stops at stop sign controlled intersections and signalized intersections. Thank you. So the city adopted the 2010 Model Traffic Code into the Longmont Municipal Code by reference in January of 2011. The Model Traffic Code allows municipalities to require bicyclists to dismount at crosswalks. Due to safety concerns, the city incorporated the language requiring bicyclists riding on sidewalks to dismount at crosswalks. There's been some misunderstanding about what it means to dismount one's bicycle at a crosswalk. Bicyclists believe it means to physically get off your bike and walk through a crosswalk. The Longmont Court, however, takes it to mean that riders on sidewalks must stop before entering the crosswalk, put a foot down, and then they can ride through the crosswalk. We did check with several nearby communities, and none of them have this requirement in their traffic regulations. So staff is seeking direction from City Council on what we should do about the dismount requirement. Your options are to direct staff to keep the current regulation as it is, or direct staff to bring back an ordinance removing the requirement that bicyclists riding on sidewalks must dismount at crosswalks, or direct staff to bring back an ordinance defining what it means to dismount consistent with the court's interpretation. And staff does recommend bringing back an ordinance removing the dismount requirement so that we are consistent with other Colorado communities. And we have a second part to this, so we can either continue all the way to the end, and then you can discuss both.
Nope, you got 5 minutes and it's running.
Got it. Well, we'll keep going then. Thank you. So the state of Colorado passed safety stop legislation last year in the form of Senate Bill 18144, And the new legislation has a few components, but the primary part impacting bicyclists and other road users is shown here. The new law allows municipalities to adopt safety stop ordinances. Specifically, the state law states that the bicyclist approaching a stop sign controlled intersection must slow down to a reasonable speed, and if it's safe, they can ride through the intersection without stopping. If it's necessary to stop for safety reasons, then they're obligated to do so. A reasonable speed is defined in the law as 15 miles per hour. So an argument in favor of adopting a safety stop ordinance is that it's consistent with how people are riding currently. Also, people that ride bicycles state that it's safer because it allows them to get in front of traffic at intersections. Another argument in favor is that a number of signals aren't easily triggered by a person on a bicycle. An argument against is that the traffic control devices assign right-of-way, and adopting a safety stop or stop as yield ordinance would diminish the importance of traffic control devices, most particularly stop signs and stop lights. It might also create confusion, as it would create inconsistency in traffic regulations from one community to the next. The city of Thornton is the only Front Range community to adopt a stop as yield ordinance that we know of. Boulder and Fort Collins, on the other hand, state that they won't be adopting a stop as yield or safety stop ordinance due to concerns over safety, as well as a desire to maintain consistency in their traffic regulations with other communities. So staff is seeking direction from City Council on whether to pursue a safety stop or a stop as yield ordinance for Longmont. Your options are direct staff to do nothing at this time, revisit the issue in 1 year while monitoring other Colorado communities that have adopted safety stop ordinances. Alternatively, you can direct staff to bring back a safety stop ordinance consistent with state law. So staff isn't opposed to the idea of a safety stop ordinance, but we'd like to be better informed on the issue before proceeding forward. With this in mind, staff recommends that City Council direct staff to hold off on bringing back an ordinance for now so we can learn from experiences of other Front Range communities, and we can then revisit the issue at a later date when we know more. And that is it.
Great. Put that back up. All right, great. I move that we go back to the last slide. There we go. Stop. I move that we direct staff to revisit the issue in 1 year in order to learn from the experiences of other communities. All right. Is there anything pressing? Good job, by the way. You rock.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I have several principles. One, that we don't make laws that we can't and won't enforce. Two, we don't make laws that people don't obey. And three, that we're consistent. And I think we should be consistent with, first of all, we should define dismount. And secondly...
Well, we'll go on to that in a second. Point of order.
But secondly, we should vote no dismount at crossroads.
Yeah, so hold on.
Because it's consistent.
Right. So right now, we're just doing... Right now, it's just directly on the motion, this motion. So then we're going to go back and talk about the other one. So, Councilmember Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I believe you said concerning us that there are bicyclists that are already performing the safety stop or stop to yield. Currently, are any of those people being cited for breaking any of our municipal traffic laws at this point?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, as I understand it, citations only occur if an accident occurs in the intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Or a crash, I should say.
All right, nobody's in the queue. Let's vote. The motion is to wait a year and bring it back with more information. All right, that passes 6-1 with Mayor Pro Tem Christensen against, but we still love her. All right, go back to the beginning. Let's deal with the other issue. All right. I move that we bring back an ordinance allowing bicyclists riding on sidewalk, or sorry, where's it at? Nope, going back. I move that we move forward with an ordinance allowing bicyclists riding on sidewalks to not dismount at crosswalks. Mayor Pro Tem?
Okay, I do think we need to, with this, I'm for this, and I do think we need to define dismount, to something meaning that you don't have to totally get off your bicycle and walk across, because that's kind of as, like requiring pedestrians to take off their shoes before they cross the sidewalk. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm all in favor of this, as long as we also put in the law a sensible description of dismount.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. Can we, it's relative to the issue of bicycles and bike lanes, but I'd like to, after we vote, I would like to get back in the queue. That's was my intent, was to get it after the vote.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the only question, the motion is, we are directing staff to move forward with an ordinance allowing bicyclists riding on sidewalks to not dismount at crosswalks. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right. Dr. Waters, you're the cue.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. Real quickly, these two items I'm pleased to see back, but there was another item that what provoked some discussion about our bicycle ordinances was obstruction of bike lanes. We had some concerns expressed and some photos of trucks and mostly vehicles. Maybe it was foliage, but obstructing bike lanes without apparent regard to what rights the bicyclists have. So was that not part of a review, and is that going to come back, or is this are these the only two issues relative to bicycles that we're concerned about?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Waters, when I was actually looking at this issue, I was kind of struggling with the original direction from City Council, and that was one of the things that I was actually pondering. And there's some history with respect to how bicycle lanes have been treated here in the city of Longmont. When I first started working here in 2002, the city used to designate a parking/bicycle lane with a single stripe. And some of you may recall this on South Pratt Parkway, for example. And we had some issues with traffic mitigation on that street because we were finding people were driving to the right of this lane when it should have been dedicated towards bicycles and parked vehicles. And then the left of it was the travel lane. Then the bicycle community in the early part of 2000s stated that they wanted to have that second stripe. And so the second stripe was added, but they were added on streets in some cases that were pretty narrow. Now, a lot of your complaints were generated from construction traffic that was occurring on Kansas Avenue. That is one of those narrower streets that was retrofitted in the past. Many of the cars that were parked in the parking lane were actually work vehicles. Some of them were dually trucks. So they were, in fact, encroaching into the bike lane. And that is kind of no longer an issue at this point. There may be some of it, but it's not to the extent that it was. So in those narrower streets where they tried to incorporate the bike lane and then maintain the parking lane and then have the travel lanes, if you want to fully prevent that, then really the answer is either eliminate the bike lane, maybe make it a sharrow, perhaps eliminate the parking lane, narrow up the travel lanes. All those are possibilities, but you have certain constraints due to the width of the right-of-way.
I get that. When you said there's not a concern.
Well, there is a concern for, yes.
If you're on a bicycle.
I misspoke, but yes, you're right. There's concern, but it's not to the degree that it was due to the.
Are there any, so it's not an ordinance issue. I'm looking at Sean because he was the one I had this interaction with initially. So it's not a change in ordinance that we should be thinking about. What about signage? Rather, because we don't, in some cases, I'm not certain all that we're doing, but in the areas where there was apparent problem, there wasn't much signage.
Mayor and Councilmember Waters, the signage is the stripe, and so the stripe creates the law, and the law is that you can't infringe or get into that bicycle lane. So that's what we've told that to our prosecuting attorney. We've told that to the different folks who are working on it. It's against the law to park in that bike lane.
Do we enforce that?
We're trying to enforce it without having to have all the signs that come along, because it really is those two stripes that delineate the bike lane, and that's the law. So
So-
we didn't want to change an ordinance that's already out there that says that you
I get
can't
that.
park.
I get that. So, so what do we do about trucks that obstruct the bike lanes? It is, we enforce. Do we need more signage to make enforcement more effective?
Mayor and Councilmember Waters, we're going to work with our parking enforcement. We have been working with our parking enforcement to get out to these places where people let us know that this is happening and enforce that law.
So I think to answer your question, there's two components to this. One is an education component in terms of it's illegal to block these lanes, and educate those folks that get those calls in terms of that component of it. That's one piece. The other piece is where we have two bike lanes and the roads aren't wide enough to really accommodate that, and that's a different look. It's going to be very specific to location where that occurs, and evaluate the options that we have in terms of managing that situation.
Thanks.
All right, let's move on to item 11B, water demand evaluation update. And you got 20 minutes. If you can get it done in 10 though, Dale, I'll keep telling people and reminding them that you're the new deputy city manager.
Mayor Bagley and members of council, Dale Rademacher, deputy city manager. I have two
All
options
hail.
for you. I can go through the presentation in probably 5 or 10 minutes, or we can take the full 20 minutes. What's your pleasure?
The quicker the better. You're awesome, Dale.
So I have Ken Houston here with me as well tonight, and John Robb, who are the two engineers, and I'm going to rely on them to answer any difficult questions as they're pulling up the presentation. What I'll start with is that this evaluation that we've done is a very rigorous demand evaluation that has considered both sides of the ledger, if you will. We've looked at our future supply needs, and we've also looked at our future demand needs, all the way through the planning horizon for the city of Longmont. I'll start with just an overview of what we'll do. So we'll do a quick introduction. We'll recap a little bit of the 2012 study so you understand where we were and where we're going. Then we got some 29 data on both demands and water yields. And then finally, evaluation of opportunities, how we can meet that demand. So some of the key goals and objectives are for tonight is to inform the council that this work has been completed, inform them of how the efforts support our sustainability efforts overall as a community, inform the council how it promotes the protection of the national environment, and to seek guidance from the council on any other or additional direction you wish to provide us. At a high level, I also wanted to point out the guiding principles continue to be a guiding document. We have a copy of the guiding principles at your counter tonight. It's one that you adopt every year to guide us on legislation. It also guides us through studies like this. Some of the key attributes or key aspects of the guiding principles, one of them is 1 in 100 year drought. That is a drought of about 7 years in duration. It's a fairly intensive drought period. It's one that we have found has served the community well over many decades, since the mid-1960s. And we're happy to report that we believe we continue at that same level of protection for our citizens going forward. The supply and drought planning has also been done in close partnership with our planning department. And I want to give a lot of credit to Erin Fosdick. She has informed our engineers and our staff in PW&R about the envisioned Longmont desired future conditions, as well as the Main Street plan. If you don't remember anything else from tonight, remember that the city's water utility should never be the reason that Longmont cannot achieve its desired outcome through Envision Longmont or any other comprehensive plan. The utility should always be there to serve and support that outcome, which again tonight we're able to do. So the 2012 evaluation, it really looked at the best data that we had at our disposal, as well as the best techniques that we had to analyze that data. It essentially again showed that we could meet our demands going into the future. We used to use a term called build out of the city. We're now learning from our planning comrades that We should be talking about planning horizons, and again, it shows that we can continue to meet those demands as we go into the future. So I'll get into the 29 study. I am not going to go through every one of the numbers here. These are all in your packet. This is on page 121 of your packet. What's important here is if you look on the first column to the left, that's where we were in 2012. Bottom line, we're at 24,595 acre feet. This is what we refer to as sort of our baseline or our reference demands. Then in this analysis that we've just completed, the middle column is the average of the water demands from 01 to 17. And the column on the far right is looking at our demands projected forward 5 years into the future. And I'll show what that means. But bottom line is we drop down to either 22,000 or to about 19,000 in future demand. That's a pretty significant drop. So why is that happening? Well, that's happening, again, because of the ongoing conservation efforts and our sustainability efforts that I can report all of our citizens are doing a great job. Some of the key things to look at is also we have downstream demands that we need to meet, as well as losses at the treatment plant, as well as our service to Lions. Again, you add all those in. Those numbers have not changed dramatically from 2012 going forward, but we're still looking at about a 5,000 acre-foot decline. Staff is recommending that we use the forward 5-year approach. We think it's the one that most reflects what's going on, and both reflects what is going on, but is also conservative enough to meet the needs of the city in the future. So now I'm coming up to the reference forecast, which is the variability table. Bottom line here is that number has gotten significantly larger. You'll remember when we did it in 2012, it ranged anywhere from about 3,000 to about 13,000 acre feet. So that's been refined a little bit more. It has increased, though, from about 5,600 acre feet up to about 10,500. So what are the key things that are causing that shift? The first one is working again with our planning staff and looking at Envision Longmont. The areas of change that are shown here, these are 2 exhibits right out of Envision Longmont. We are looking at a higher density within the city, higher levels of housing in particular, multi-story, those types of development that does have an impact on water supply. And so if you look at this particular chart, it shows that the impact of that is about 2,600 acre feet. That's about half of that 5,000 acre foot increase, if you will. The second key change is when we looked at and analyzed the dry year adjustment, which is a key thing that we got to always keep our eye on. During dry years, our demands will peak up, and that's what happened in 2012, and I'll show you on a chart here, which is also in your packet, as well as future water conservation. And so, again, if you look at the forward 5-year column, we are already assuming that we are going to continue to conserve, and that's why that number is 0. It's not 0 because we're not going to continue to conserve, it's that we're already counting on that. It's already accounted for in that equation. So this chart gives you a sense of the declining per capita use. That very top one, the one in red, again shows that line declining over time. And we projected out that forward 5-year look. That's the demand line, if you will, that we're looking at. The dry year adjustment is larger because of the dry year that we experienced in 2012. And if you remember, that was a very dry year. It wasn't quite as dry as 2002, but it was right up there. And what happens, you can see demand peaked up pretty significantly there. We always need to know that that is going to happen to us. And I think everything that we're doing here is looking at and trying to anticipate those dry years so that we are making adjustments for that and holding back reserve, if you will. Think of it as your insurance policy that we're holding back in case we have one of those dry years in order to meet the demand going forward. I'll also say that hydrology is not as exact a science as hydraulics or as structures or as other fields of engineering. Hydrology relies a lot on Mother Nature, tends to throw a bit of curveballs at us. And so everything we try to do, in particular in water supply planning, is to make sure that we have a reserve, is to make sure that we have a fallback. What I can tell you is that any number I show you is not going to be exact. It is not going to be perfect. We are trying to work within realms of a risk analysis, if you will, that assures the long-term viability of our supply and the prosperity of our community. The other important policy direction in here, which again is another backup, if you will, is that we are going through this 1 in 100-year drought right now. We're projecting to go through it for a period of 7 years, including the year before. Actually, it's 9 years. It's a 7-year drought with a year going into it and a year after it, with no demand reduction. None of us think that's likely what we're going to do. I would never stand here and tell you not to put on watering restrictions going into a drought. The reason is you don't know if you're in a 1 in 100-year drought or you're in a 1 in 500-year drought. So we're absolutely going to be putting on demand restrictions. Again, that is another buffer that we have built into this thing to get us through it. At the end of the day, we end up very close to the demand that we had before, within a couple hundred acre feet, just around 32,000 acre foot of demand. Part of the supply analysis was really pretty cool work. We were able to use our graphic information system, our GIS tools, to get down to the individual parcels and the amount of historic water that is remaining on those parcels yet to come into our system, as well as the water deficits that will come forward as those areas urbanize. We did that throughout the entire planning area, and that was part of the calculation on the supply. And so what's happened is our supply is actually coming down a little bit, largely because of the area north of Highway 66 that has converted more to Boulder County open space, in particular out east of the railroad and what used to be the Longmont Tech Center area. That is largely open space at this point. So the historic water that was there is no longer coming to the city. But of course, we are also not getting demand up there. So there's some offsetting happening there. As you look at this chart, you'll notice that this is looking at the demands with our existing system. This is if we continue to apply the raw water policy going forward, but we didn't do any additional projects. That would show that our existing system can get us through about the first 3 or 4 years of the drought, but then we would start to have shortages. I think the shortages come up to be about 15,000 acre feet over that time period, which is about 11.5% of the total demand. The next chart shows you how the system performs with the Windy Gap firming project at 6,000 acre feet. It shows that we have about 1,000 acre foot of deficit, which I will tell you is probably within the range of error of our ability to calculate numbers. At 3.2%, I consider that a very close balance. The next one is 8,000 acre feet, which is the current your current decision on participation levels. Again, that shows we meet it. We don't have any deficit at all. So what I want to leave you with, and these are the same questions that were in your packet, is this current evaluation sufficient for the council to make decisions in the near-term future about the utility, the capital program? Becky Dorial is going to be returning to you in July with a much broader capital program. It's going to be looking at things like the treatment plant expansion and so forth. And so we're going to be looking for some decisions to be made as we go forward on that will impact the work that she's doing on the rate and fee study.
Dale, do you need our?
Sorry.
Are these future considerations, or are these the things you want us to comment on tonight?
What I'm looking for tonight is a couple of things. One is if this is not sufficient information, what additional information do you need? The other key thing is question number 3, the timing of a decision. Should you want to reconsider or take another look at your Windy Gap participation? You have choices on when you can make that decision. One is following the federal lawsuit conclusion. At that point, obviously you have a better sense of the project moving forward. The consequence of that, however, is that may be late enough in the process. I can't predict when the lawsuit will be decided, that it will potentially have a bigger impact into your rates. Keep in mind, I think we have informed you that the price of the project has significantly increased, such that essentially the cost of the 8,000 acre-foot level of participation is now very similar to what 10,000 acre-foot cost a few years ago. And so we do have a financial issue that we together have to work through and figure out the best solution forward. So that's one thing we'd like to have a sense of. What additional information do you believe you would need or want to have in order to relook at some of those issues? And I would encourage that to be done in the context of the entire CIP of the utility, not looking at just segments of it. And again, Becky's going to be returning in June with that discussion with you. So it's something to sort of think about.
We don't need to
between now
talk
and
about
then.
it tonight. We just need to think about the question because it's
Right.
coming up.
I don't need an exact answer unless there's something pressing that you say, I really need this if you expect me to be able to make a decision.
We look forward to meeting with Becky. Anything else?
That's all I've got.
All right, great. Dr. Waters?
Just a quick question. Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Has the last time we looked at Chimney Hollow, the cost estimates had increased by 32%, as I recall.
Correct.
Part of that, the largest part of that, as I recall, was the contingency fund. Have those numbers changed? Are the estimates, are we still within what those estimates were 3 or 4 months ago, whenever we looked at it?
Council members, Waters, yes, those numbers have not changed because they're really not going to change. We're in the bidding process for this project, and that will much greatly inform.
So they might, but it's partly because of where the project is.
Yes.
Correct.
So just for me, that will be a variable that is going to weigh heavily on decisions we're going to make because it has huge implications for rates if that cost continues to escalate. So.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I would move that we accept this report.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem and seconded by Councilmember Rodriguez. Nobody's in the queue. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to, we don't have anything at the state level. They're out of session. So we don't need to do that tonight. Final call, public invited to be heard. I see some members of the public. Sir, come on in. Come on down, Mr. Gravel. Oh, were you in there? Was there something in the queue? All right, just checking.
Thanks. I just wanted to say thanks for your time. I know this is a hard vote for all of you. Thanks for some of you for the time you spent meeting with us and stuff like that. I do want to go forward, and I want us to learn from this process a little bit. I think part of this was a little disingenuous. We had meetings beforehand with some of the neighborhoods, and we were told we need to break up into small groups. Let's not talk about this together in a big forum, of which both of those meetings, everyone said, no, we're talking about this. And then we come here, and I know they're doing hard work, and I thank you all for the considerations on the bike lanes and improvements and the new stoplight and stuff like that. That's great. But let's learn something here. This was not about CDOT turning two lanes in. These 5-year numbers that are quoted, ever since they changed that to a protected red arrow, they've changed. If you want to go back and include that whole 5 years, I can go back and include 20 years and say we don't need any changes. So it's a little just disingenuous. I want to make sure that when this happens again, and it will happen throughout the rest of the city, let's get the communities involved first. Let's not just have the plan. It's already going to be done with CDOT, and we're just an afterthought on how to get things done. That's how we felt. And I really think that there's, you guys did your best, but I don't think you got the full information either. We're going to need new traffic lights at Pratt Parkway, South Pratt Parkway, near Front Range Community College, Plateau and Hover, and Plateau and 287 because of this project. And I think this project is really because they want that bypass to go by Quail Ridge and up into the 119 over on the other side. That's kind of what I think we learned here. So let's make sure in the future that the neighborhoods are in the planning first so we don't have this contention and stuff. So, and I do want to thank you for your time. I've been here till the end of the meetings because of the pool and the ice rink, and this for the last 3 times. I feel like I'm almost like a council member. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gravel. Anybody else? All right. Council, let's move on to mayor and council comments. Councilmember Peck.
Actually, thank you, Mayor Bagley, but I wasn't going to make a comment. I was wanted to circle back and make a motion, if that's okay to do that at this time.
Sure.
Okay.
And if we're not in mayor and council comments because that would be inappropriate.
Exactly.
So go ahead.
Thank you. So circling back to the Pike Road project, and I do acknowledge the expertise of our engineers and traffic studies, but I would say that we are going to be coming back to this issue when that development at the west end is done. We're going to have same conversations about traffic and studies. So I would like to move tonight that we reduce the speed limit on Pike Road to 35 miles an hour. And even though the projections and the studies, et cetera, said the best thing to do is to keep it at 40 or 42, we have the right to reduce it and see if that also reduces the speed limits as well. So I move that we reduce that speed on Pike Road to 35 miles per hour.
Okay. Is there a second? I asked. So this is what I meant by we're going to back each other up. So here we go. It's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. One of the things that I've learned in the past 8 to 9 months is that the posted speed limit hardly has anything to do with the speed that people follow on a road. The road determines the speed limit. And so I'm not going to vote for this because I think that changing the posting before we know what the effect of the traffic calming measures that are going to be taken as a result of the plan we just passed would be putting the cart before the horse. You know, I think that we have an obligation to keep a close eye on what happens to Pike Road, not only because of the new developments at both ends that are anticipated, but also because of the design changes that are expected to change people's behavior on the road. And I hope they will do what's anticipated. So I think that we should, and I'm sure that our very prudent staff will keep a close eye on this road and see what happens and change the speed limits when it's warranted. But I don't think that it would do any good now.
Dr. Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. Councilmember Peck, does your motion, and no emotion now, does your motion imply that now the plan changes because there would be no traffic signal at Kaufman?
Councilmember Peck. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just cleared you. Go.
Thank you. No, it doesn't imply that. Once again, I think that what I'm trying to do is be proactive in this, because we are going to, in another year or year and a half, come back to the exact same problems when that development goes in. And we're going to have the same discussion. We had it 2 years ago when McWhinney came in, and it was the same issue. We're having it now. We're going to have it again as we add more and more people. So I think proactively, we should change it and keep the stoplight. We have a choice. It's a choice that we get to make. It isn't mandated anywhere. It isn't. So I think we should just drop the speed limit and keep the stoplight.
Dr. Waters.
So I'm sympathetic to the concern. So sympathetic, I'd like to do this in a number of places in town. My concern is that I don't know enough about traffic engineering and the implications to not know that, to not be certain I'm not creating more risks to do this, number one. And number two, I would not know how to explain to all the other residents at Longmont, especially in Ward 1, along County Line Road 1 and 17th, who want exactly the same thing and have been told that the algorithm, the warrants for traffic lights have not been met. I get that. And that the algorithms or the formula for establishing speed limits suggest something other than arbitrarily lowering them. So I'm sympathetic. I'm going to vote against the motion, not because I don't feel the same way. I just think I'm going to rely on the expertise of our traffic engineers to guide, how I think about this.
Nobody's in the queue, but I was just, so theoretically, I know a guy who there's a traffic light in his neighborhood. I just know this guy, right? And he gets up in the morning and there's no traffic, but he sits at a stoplight for 2 minutes every morning and no traffic comes. And I just saying, I know a guy and he might or might not run that light a lot because there's no traffic ever. And so people, you've got two choices. You can either wait for two traffic lights, two traffic patterns twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, or you can wait all the time, one. And so, the reason why the warrants are there is because people have learned that they demand a light and then it gets put in, and they're thinking in terms of, I want to stop that traffic so I can go. What they don't realize is there's plenty of times when there's no traffic and they're at a red light, and they either have to break the law and be unsafe, break the law, get a ticket, or waste their time. So I'm going to vote against it, not because I don't think it's a great idea, but that's why. So let's go ahead and vote. So the motion is, let's keep the stoplight and then reduce it to 35 on Pike. So a no vote means no. Yes vote means yes. If you vote no, the motion fails. And the speed limit stays at 40 with the stoplight. All right, that fails 5-2 with Councilmember Peck and Mayor Pro Tem 4, and the rest of us against. All right. So before we get on, since we're doing that, I'd actually like to make a motion that I move that are the trees in the plan that we approved? Or is it just kind of like, well, we got 80? So I guess my point is, it might be a lot easier just to, I move that we direct staff to replace every one of those trees, at least 58. You said 80, but I want to make sure that we replace all of them.
We have to do 80.
Okay, I move that we replace at least 80.
Correct, that's in the ordinance.
All right, do I have a second? All right, let's vote. I just want to make sure there's one of them here still. At least I can take them back and say we've done something. All right, and that should pass unanimously, but I don't know yet. All right. I also would like to direct staff to prepare a letter to CDOT requesting that CDOT do something to install signage to slow northbound traffic as it approaches Pike coming into Longmont. Make it an official request. All right, Councilmember Martin?
I'm sorry, Mayor Bagley, I have a motion to introduce as well, and I was trying to get
Okay,
in for
all right,
that one.
cool. Let's vote on that one, and at least we'll do what we can to try to get that traffic slowed down into Pike. All right, that passes unanimously. Councilmember Peck? I'm sorry, Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. We talked about the need for a noise barrier on the north side of Pike. And we also talked a lot about how intractable the terrain on the north side of Pike is. So I believe that the replacement policy does not say where the replacement trees have to go. I would like to direct staff to evaluate the feasibility of putting as many as possible of those trees on the north side of Pike.
But before I second that, can we just say that we direct staff to put as many, I don't want them to come back with a feasibility study, just do it. Put as many of the trees on the north as possible. Okay, I second that motion. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, and then one last concern I have is there was one question about storm drainage that apparently there's the only storm drainage is on Sunset and Pike on the south side. And apparently when it rains and whatnot, a lot of there's no drainage. So as we move forward on this project, have we looked at drainage along Pike? The reason I'm asking is, the reason I know it's yes, but if we could find, what are we doing? Because I know specifically there are residents here that was one of their questions earlier that wasn't asked. Sorry. But hey, we got 11 minutes to kill.
We're here for you. Mayor Bagley, City Council members, as part of the design, we look at the existing drainage. We look at what we can do to resolve. There are several drainage issues. With the advent of curb and gutter along most of the roadway, we'd be providing certain areas where there'd be inlets and underground drainage system to properly drain the road.
Okay, so that's being addressed?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right.
Simple answer for council, anytime we go in and redesign it, that's a fundamental issue that we deal with to alleviate any problems with drainage.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you. All right, time for mayor and council comments. Actually, not yet. Councilmember Martin, do you have anything else, or you just? No, I just forgot. Okay, unpush the button. All right, anybody else have anything they want to say? All right, great. City manager remarks?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
All right, city attorney remarks?
No comments, Mayor.
Hey, I'm proud of this council tonight. Good job, guys.